We accompany our young hero as he departs Konoha's busy city center and heads to the training grounds scattered around the village's periphery. Naruto is going to the training grounds in order to practice a new jutsu that the academy's instructors discussed in class today. It was called the summoning jutsu, and after the teacher demonstrated how to summon a bulldog-sized squirrel, he began to memorize the hand seals and that blood was required. This had the negative effect of preventing him from hearing the teacher explain how dangerous it is to summon without a contract. People have died doing it. He was therefore ready to attempt his first summon when he eventually reached training ground 2. He was unaware that he was being followed by a silver-haired Anbu who was not on duty at the moment. It was too late for Kakashi to warn Naruto before he yelled, "Summoning Jutsu," and disappeared in a puff of smoke as he bit his hand, summoned his chakra, and began the hand seals. Kakashi thought, "The Hokage is going to have my ass." He prayed to Kami that he would sign a contract with their village rather than one with Iwa. Page break. Location: Monster Summon Realm, Bran Castle. Dracula had definitely had a bad day. It all began when he woke up and was unable to understand why today was different. Nothing had ever changed in their realm, which is how the majority of them prefer it. Initially, it was minor issues, such as a small group of vampires asking him to hunt in the Mice Summons realm outside their borders. Frank then sent a messenger zombie to inform him that a few zombies attempted to enter the Deer Summons realm. He was on the verge of calling a meeting with the other monster heads following those two incidents, but he refrained, believing that would put an end to the strange happenings of the day. That is, until the hunting party returned with information that prompted him to call the meeting. Page break time: 25 minutes after Naruto vanished. Location: Hokage office. Kakashi was considering how to inform the third without drawing too much criticism as he entered the Hokage's office and had to wait because he was in a meeting with the elders. When the politeness was over, he decided to be direct and told the Hokage, "The reason I am here is because of Naruto." Hiruzen raised an eyebrow at this and gestured for him to go on, packing his pipe as he said, "Naruto's reverse summoned himself like Jiraiya did." Kakashi might have laughed if things weren't so serious. The old Kage, who appeared to have aged by 20 years, turned white as a sheet, and the unlit pipe clattered on the floor. He bit his thumb as soon as the data was processed, and Enma the Monkey King materialized in all his armored splendor with a terrified cry of, "Summoning Jutsu." "What, did another ninja try to summon without a contract?" Enma asked jokingly, realizing that Hiruzen's expression was nearly identical to the one he had when Jiraiya had his cough incident cough. Enma scowled, sighed, and said, "Can you give a physical description and tell me about his personality and I'll send out messenger monkeys to our allies and let you know if anything turns up." Hiruzen's apprehensive laugh was followed by silence. After expressing gratitude to the Monkey King, Hiruzen gave him the tools he needed to locate Naruto. Given Hiruzen's description of his personality, I have 3 guesses that I'll check into first. First being the Rhino clan, second being the Toad clan, the third I'd hazard a guess and say the Hyena clan. After that I'll send messengers out to the other clans to let them know. Enma sighed deeply and stood up to go when Kakashi asked him a question he was interested in. Page break time: 5 minutes after the hunting party's return. Location: Sedlic Ossuary. Dracula looked around the table at the other faction bosses and sighed, remembering why he detested the meetings. The Fate Sisters had predicted that one of their summoners would awaken the powerful boss, who had been asleep since the Ten Tails attack, making the monster contract complicated. Since the sisters were typically the busiest of all of them, it was hardly surprising that Dracula, the acting boss at the time, saw everyone but them there. With a quick glance at Sato, Dracula was startled out of his reverie by Medusa's words, "Why have you summoned this meeting? I was very busy at the time." Dracula mentally noted that he would speak to the Odokuro later. With a mental sigh, Dracula stood up and said, "I believe I have found us a potential summoner." He paused to see how they would respond. After being inundated with questions, he raised his hand to quiet the room and started telling his story. "It was but 10 minutes ago that my hunting party brought me a human child around the age of 10 clad in orange and he has an extremely high amount of chakra. I will recall this meeting when the boy wakes up. Then he will have to go through the trails. I only called this meeting to give you a heads up so you can tell your factions." Naruto wakes up and tries to recall what transpired. He was positive he performed the jutsu correctly, but if so, where was he? As he looked around, he saw that he was in a bedroom that appeared to be sparsely furnished, with only the bed on which he was lying and 2 rugs, one in front of one of the 2 doors and one to the right of the twin-sized bed. He observed that the stone room he was in was completely cool despite the lack of a fan. The shrunken head on the door without the mat said, "Dracula will be here shortly to take you before the council," shattering his observations. Naruto was met with an intriguing sight before he could start asking questions of the shrunken head. A man with skin that could have made Sasuke appear tan, who was about 6 feet 5 and more than a foot taller than his diminutive 5'2" frame, entered through the door the head was on. It appeared that the man was wearing a black cloak that extended down to his ankles, exposing his black leather dress shoes. As the man spoke, Dracula noticed that he had a calming quality and that he could persuade others that his viewpoint was correct. "May I ask for your name, young one?" Dracula asked, trying to avoid sounding curious. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki. I am training to become the best ninja in Konoha. I'll work my hardest to become the Hokage so that way people would have to start treating at me like I'm somebody, believe it." Naruto exclaimed with enthusiasm. Dracula had to consider the possibility that he would make an excellent summoner if he were to become a ninja. Additionally, he has heard positive things about Konoha from the Deer clan, stating that it is one of the most tolerant villages, which should aid the council in deciding whether or not he should be a summoner. He woke up from his reverie, gestured for Naruto to follow him, and escorted the youngster out of the castle. The next building they were approaching looked interesting, and Naruto was in awe because he knew that he would have become lost in the castle if Dracula hadn't been there. It appeared to be a monastery, but it had a lot of what appeared to be bones on the front that formed a circular shield with what appeared to be a giant monster's open maw closing down on a small human. He nearly pissed his pants when they opened the doors, but that wasn't what gave him the chills. The room in front of him had a long rectangular table that led to the back of the room, where it opened to what would have been a lovely view of a large lake if it weren't for the creature that appeared to be on the other side of the railing and had the longest neck he had ever seen. He could only see about 8 feet of its neck, which was covered in sea green scales on the bottom and ocean blue scales on the top, before it vanished beneath the balcony and he assumed went much further down. A 5'8" woman with what he believed to be snake-like hair and a snake-like tail in place of legs was visible on the left side of the table. Her scales were emerald green with a forest green camo pattern and a white underbelly. A 7-foot albino werewolf with immaculate white claws that appeared capable of easily tearing a man in two appeared to be to her right. An 8-foot-tall man with gray skin and stitches running across the majority of his visible frame, whose pulsating muscles gave the impression that he could easily wield a large zanbato, took the seat to the right of the werewolf. He thought Dracula sat in the vacant chair at the end nearest Naruto. Across from the half-snake lady, on the right side of the table, stood a massive 15-foot-tall skeleton with polished white bones that were covered in cuts and nicks. There was a 6-foot-tall figure on the right of the skeleton, covered in faded yellow bandages, with extra bandages hanging off its wrists and patches of greenish-gray skin underneath. An 8-foot two-handed axe lay next to him, appearing as sharp as the werewolf's claws, and the last creature at the table was a magnificent 13 feet tall, with stone-colored skin and a jagged wooden crown resting atop his head. On his back, there appeared to be 2 spears, each about 6 feet long. Naruto wisely chose not to enrage them since he knew that they could all kill him with ease and without hesitation if they so desired. Dracula chose to take his seat while Naruto was observing the people in the room. "Glad to see you could all make it. This young boy is Naruto Uzumaki, a ninja in training for Konoha." When he was finished, he motioned for the members to introduce themselves to young Naruto. "Naruto, my name is Medusa. I am a Gorgon. I represent the Greek monsters aligned to the contract." The half-snake lady said. Next, the werewolf said, "My name is Zevon. I am a werewolf, and I represent my fellow werewolves, Wendigos, and Sir Kapala." When Chupacabra mentioned that, Dracula became alert and inquired, "And how is Kapala doing?" The stitched man next to Zevon interrupted him with an angry glare before he could reply, saying, "That can wait till this is sorted out. My name is Frank, young one. I am a golem made from dead people's flesh, hence the stitching. I represent the golems, zombies, and the Sasquatches." When he coughed, everyone's eyes shifted to the person wearing the crown, who said, "My name is Konungur. I am a troll, and I represent the Norse monsters aligned to the contract. My name is Pharaoh Narmer. I am a mummy, and I represent the Egyptian monsters aligned to the contract." After taking that as a cue, the man with the bandage continued. The long-necked creature spoke, "My name is Ness. I am a plesiosaur. I represent all the water monsters in the contract." The giant skeleton, noticing that the others were watching, introduced itself, saying, "My name is Sato. I am an Odokuro, and I represent the skeletons and the Japanese monsters aligned to the contract." Dracula was the only creature that hadn't done so yet. You know me, Naruto, but did you know I am a vampire? I speak for the vampires, ghosts, and other flying-type monsters. I also happen to be the acting boss. Dracula got up, noticing that everyone had finished their introductions, and decided to wrap things up quickly. Naruto was perplexed by this and said, "What do you mean acting boss? Tell you what, if you can pass one of our tests and earn the right to summon the monsters of the contract, I'll tell you in the presence of the Hokage, that way I don't have to repeat myself, okay?" Dracula sighed, realizing that he really didn't want to answer. He then considered a way to delay that. Naruto wholeheartedly agreed, oblivious to the laughter of all the faction bosses. You know me, Naruto, but did you know I am a vampire? I speak for the vampires, ghosts, and other flying-type monsters. I also happen to be the acting boss. Naruto was perplexed by this and said, "What do you mean acting boss? Tell you what, if you can pass one of our tests and earn the right to summon the monsters of the contract, I'll tell you in the presence of the Hokage, that way I don't have to repeat myself, okay?" Dracula sighed, realizing that he really didn't want to answer. He then considered a way to delay that. Naruto wholeheartedly agreed, oblivious to the laughter of all the faction bosses. Page break present time. Dracula started waving a hand at the other council members, saying, "So Naruto, how a person is to get accepted to the contract is by passing at least 4 of our tests. We will waive this for you and only make it 1, but completing the standard 4 will greatly increase your standing among the clan's members." Naruto started to yell to start all the challenges at once, but Dracula stopped him with a raised hand and a stern look, telling him to wait until he was done. "Now Ness, Zevon, and I have a similar test. We each would take some of your chakra and taste it to see if you have an affinity to what goes well with our respected clans. Now Medusa and Narmer have a test of will, while Frank and Konunger have a test of physical and nature connection strength respectively, and lastly we have Sato's test of endurance. You can take these challenges at any time and in any order. You just have to say when." Dracula concluded. Observing that he was awaiting a response, he made the decision to complete all 3 chakra tests simultaneously and wondered if he could. They could do all 3 simultaneously, Dracula said, but it would exhaust him. Gaining the respect of the 3, Naruto asked, "Well, what kind of ninja would be if I stopped the mission even if I'm tired?" As he confidently approached Ness, closely followed by Dracula and Zevon. Naruto nodded in agreement, placed his hands in the ram's seal, and started to drudge up his chakra. "Now Naruto, you are going to have to flare your chakra as we each take a piece. I'll tell you when we have enough." And he felt the drain immediately after he flared his chakra, as Zevon and Ness took all the necessary chakra in a single swipe, and Ness took a large bite from the plesiosaur. He turned to see Dracula slowly consuming and relishing his chakra as he worked up to the necessary amount, and he felt no drain from him. After the initial depletion from Ness and Zevon, Dracula could already feel his reserves replenishing more than he was depleting, and he was finding it difficult to believe that this child's chakra tasted so good. Dracula found what he was searching for after a good, long minute. As he was extracting his fangs from the chakra he flared, he tasted some chakra that seemed familiar, but he was unable to identify it. The other members of the council who were not able to sample Naruto's chakra gasped as Dracula said, "That was the best chakra I've had in a long time. Also, you pass my portion of the chakra test, you have the required yin release affinity." He sighed with satisfaction after having another chance to taste it. Ness said, "He has the required water affinity for my portion." As everyone turned to Zevon to hear his response, he added, "He has the required earth affinity for my portion and the bonus wind affinity for Kapala to teach somethings too." The fact that their new summoner had 4 affinities shocked the others who didn't have any of his chakra. He would have finished half the council with just 1 more test. For a moment, Naruto considered that if he completed the 2 tests of will and the endurance test, he would only have 2 more to complete. The nature connection test seemed fairly simple, and the only test left would be the strength test, which he would wait to do until he had received the necessary training from his sensei after creating genin, even though he knew he was strong. Once he had finished thinking, he said, "I would like to do Medusa's and Narmer's tests of will." The 2 individuals in question smiled as if they had won the lottery. They both had the most difficult tests, with the exception of Frank's strength test. In order to shape Naruto's chakra, Narmer wrapped his eyes, nose, ears, and mouth in bandages, cutting off his senses and forcing chakra to his mind like the Yamanakas from Konoha. "As you wish, Naruto," Narmer said, then started to unwrap more of his bandages until he had 2 feet of them hanging off his wrist. Narmer was not easily startled, but he was taken aback by his sewer-like mental environment. The majority of people had no mindscapes at all. He was therefore taken aback when he came upon a massive cage composed of steel bars with what appeared to be an extremely intricate seal in the center while exploring the enormous sewer system that represented Naruto's mind. He saw a single enormous red eye with a slit pupil open and narrow at the mummy as he carefully passed a bandage through the bars. After a few moments, the beast moved closer to the light, revealing the Kyaiba in all its splendor to the mummy, who was slowly pulling the wrappings back from himself while they continued to stare. In an attempt to compare their sizes while keeping eye contact, the mother reasoned that the enormous beast must have been roughly the same size as the real clan boss, if not slightly smaller. Surprisingly, the Kyaiba broke the silence. "What are you doing here, Ba-me?" the fox yelled, ending the stare off. The beast hummed in contemplation. For summon-wise, the monster clan is the oldest and has more battle experience, and their boss does have the ability to go toe-to-toe with the 10 tails, so all in all not too bad. Narmer, remembering who he was speaking to, said bluntly, "Your container," at the fox's nod. "I was sent here to test his will to resist temptations." He made the decision to start with the most important question: how many trials has he completed? He was surprised to learn that the answer was 3 out of 8 and that the mummies were number 4, but what really shocked the beast was what came next. He knew that all summonses gave potential summoners a test and that group contracts had multiple tests, one for each section. The mummy vanished in a whirlpool of sand, leaving the fox to wonder what it had been told. "There are 2 more tests that you should be aware of. The one from Medusa where she will be coming in here as well, and Konunger's test involves nature chakra. I just thought it appropriate to let you know." The fox was shocked because he knew his host was being held back, but he had already passed 3 of the tests. Even the sage preferred to study under those damnable toads rather than take the test. He would have to test him when the boy eventually entered the seal, but hearing that the child was still so strong made him smile. Perhaps he would be the one his father had mentioned. He settled into his cage as comfortably as possible and began to think about his young host, deciding to sleep until this Medusa person arrived. Narmer's thoughts strayed as he prepared to administer the test, recalling the fox and wondering if Naruto knew about him. While Medusa was taking her test, he would have to inform the others. He dragged Naruto into the extremely powerful genjutsu as he completed the preparation. When he opened his eyes, Naruto saw nothing but desert instead of the council chambers. He felt a sense of dread rising as he began to approach the pyramids and got closer and closer to them. He entered the biggest pyramid and was met with a genuinely terrifying scene. The Hokage, Ichirakus, and Iruka were backed into a corner by a massive snake that was at least 48 feet long from head to tail, had pitch-black scales, a crimson-red underbelly, and a wide neck that gave it a hooded appearance. Even though he could see a slight hint of gold off to the side, he didn't care because his precious people were in danger. With a loud cry of battle, he ran at the snake to divert its attention from the prisoners and give them time to escape. Naruto bravely faced a Pep's genjutsu counterpart. "Did you know he was the host of the Kyaiba?" Narmer asked Dracula as he spoke to the other council members. Dracula shrugged his shoulders and said, "I had a suspicion after the chakra test but didn't get enough of his chakra to know for certain." They were still upset that Dracula had forgotten to mention that, even though they understood that he never made assumptions and would always check before saying something that would spark a commotion. The silence was only broken when Narmer began to remove the bandages that had severed his 5 senses in order to increase the power of the genjutsu. Naruto was panting heavily as the snake proved to be more resilient than it appeared. Fortunately, he bought the 4 enough time to flee, but all of his advances only caused minor annoyance to the enormous beast Euro, that is, until the beast vanished and he found himself back in front of the council. Then Narmer spoke. "Well, you passed my test with flying colors, kid. That makes 4 out of the 8 of us. Do you still want to do more trials?" The council blinks, then howls with laughter as Naruto asks, "Yeah, I want to do Medusa's trial next, but may I ask what that snake was?" 10 minutes later, when they had finally collected themselves, Narmer made the decision to respond. "Kid, never let him hear you say that. That was a Pep, the god of chaos and darkness, from the Egyptians' point of view anyways. That's why we laughed at you asking as if he was just some normal snake. He is part of my portion of the contract and is very prideful. I used him in the genjutsu because he is one of the best fighters we have despite being morally questionable." Naruto blanched at that, which sparked more laughter. But chose to inquire later after Dracula had given more details. "All right, hatchling, get ready for my test. it's going to be 10 times more difficult than Narmer's test. Medusa slithered up to him and said, "Now look into my eyes," which he did. When he did, he felt drawn to a memory that was given by the Kya, by himself rather than by him or Medusa, though he was unaware of this. You see, Medusa came upon the cage Narmer described while searching for a terrible memory to play in order to determine whether the young summoner would be overcome by fear or sadness. She slithered in the direction of the cage with the intention of verifying what the bandaged undead man had said. A red eye opened as she got closer. The Kya Bai snarled in a bored tone, "You must be this Medusa the other Ba Mei talked about." A little annoyed, Medusa had to ask, "And just what exactly makes us exiles?" "And I was actually hoping for a bit of help for my test. I wanted to test to see if extreme fear or sadness would petrify him." The great beast paused, then considered the repercussions of doing so, then grinned as big as a fox. He said, "Could you use one of my memories?" Medusa shrugged and began to slither towards the cage, taking the paw and the bare minimum of chakra needed. "I could if I had some of your chakra. I could play your memory for the boy." This took all but 2 seconds in the real world. Naruto simply sat and observed the memory, finding it hard to believe what he had just witnessed. He appeared to be the son of the 4th Hokage and a red-haired woman who could shoot chains from her body, and he had the Kya Bai sealed inside of him. Seeing the Kya Bai attack from a different angle was simply too much. Even though he couldn't understand the reasoning behind the village's animosity toward him, he could now see both sides of the story. He didn't blame the Hokage, even though he would still chastise him for all of this. The council was chatting among themselves for about 3 minutes while he stood there rearranging his life's goals. Naruto then said, "Whose trail am I doing now?" Konunger said gravely, waving his hand in a "come here" gesture. "Well, the only trail you could do as of this moment is my nature test. Your body is not yet ready to face the endurance or strength trails." Naruto was intrigued when he saw that the giant troll's crown was in his hand rather than on his head, but he decided to keep his attention on the troll while he gave him more instructions. As he placed his hand on Naruto's shoulder and channeled a small amount of nature chakra into the boy, the rock troll explained, "We of the monster clan have 3 types of sage mode for the 3 types of beasts. My test is to see which of the nature chakras you are compatible with." The outcome shocked every council member. After shrinking into a miniature Kya Bai, Naruto reverted to his almost normal form, but he retained a fox-like muzzle, fox ears and eyes, and 9 fox tails behind him. He then fully transformed back into a human, but he appeared to have 6 rings spread around the outside of his face, with what appeared to be enough space for 2 more. The first ring was black with a thin red lining on the inside, resembling Dracula's cloak. The second ring resembled one of Medusa's snakes with the same color pattern as her lower half. The third ring had the same faded yellow with a greenish-gray inside. The fourth ring had a scale-like pattern with a sea green color. The fifth ring was albino white and gave the appearance of fur. And the final ring was stone gray with a brown wooden bark color lining the inside. Konunger then struck Naruto in the back with his crown while he gaped in amazement at his ability to use all 3 of the nature chakras that the monster clan possessed. Naruto fell unconsciously to the stone floor, startling the council out of their shock. Dracula swooped down, picked up the boy, and began to depart, but not before saying a few final words. "I would tell the people that you represent that he did indeed pass all but 2 trails that should earn the respect of most of the others. Well, I'll send him back when he is awake and have him summon us to talk to the leader of his village so that way we can explain it to him and the leader at the same time." With a moan, Naruto awoke and slowly stood up despite the weariness in his muscles. Observing that he had returned to the room where he had begun, but that this time there was a dresser with a message on top of it. "Naruto, there are clothes in the dresser below that should fit you," he began reading as he shuffled to the note. "I had our clan's tailor make it for you after we took your measurements when you first arrived. The bathroom is accessible through the other door, and we have installed a clock. I will visit you at around 10 o'clock, but until then, please rest in your room, take a shower, and change. Since most people are still unaware that you are our summoner, it is best that you stay in your room." After noticing that it was approximately 9:15, Naruto decided to follow Drac's advice and take a shower. He gathered the fresh clothes and went to the restroom. The clock indicated that it was 9:45 by the time he finished showering, drying off, and putting on his new clothes. He chose to enjoy his new appearance in a mirror that appeared during his shower since he had some free time. He was standing there wearing black ninja pants with sea green and dark green stripes on his right and left legs, respectively, and a pair of crimson wooden sandals. The pants were held up by an empty utility belt made of albino fur. Like the flak jackets, he was wearing a red-orange shirt with a bone-white swirl in the center of the chest. In addition, he wore a stone-gray battle cloak with 2 eyes on the hood. The left eye appeared to be closed, revealing a scaled eyelid with 4 claw slashes over it that appeared to have been scarred a long time ago, while the right eye was pale yellow. A partial circle with 6 smaller circles was located in the center of the cloak's back. Each ring was a different color. The first ring was black with a thin red lining on the inside, similar to Dracula's cloak. The second ring resembled one of Medusa's snakes and had the same color pattern as her lower half. The third ring had the same faded yellow with a greenish-gray on the inside. The fourth ring had a scale-like pattern with a sea green color. The fifth ring was albino white and gave the appearance of fur, and the final ring was stone gray with a brown wooden bark. He didn't notice it because it was on his face, but it is his human sage mode. The clock chimed to let him know it was 10 o'clock as he was finishing up his examination of his new attire, and Dracula arrived shortly after, delighted to see Naruto dressed in his new attire and no longer wearing his old orange outfit. Making sure he still had the contract scroll up his sleeve, Dracula made another follow him gesture and headed for the castle's dinging room. The two of them were nervous as they approached the dining hall. Dracula, since he was unsure of who had learned of their new summoner. Because he had only completed 2 of the trails, Naruto was unsure if all the beasts on the other side of the doors would accept him as a summoner. When the doors opened, he was greeted by a huge outdoor dining area with tables to the left and right as far as the eye could see, and a long table with the clan's council seated on the opposite city aside from Dracula, of course. When he looked up, he heard a swift wind and saw dragons, gargoyles, and a lot of other creatures he couldn't recognize due to their rapid speed. He and the diners were drawn in by a loud, chakra-enhanced cough, and Dracula announced the news in a loud voice. Dracula took a moment to process the news before revealing the most important one of all. For those of you unaware, we gained a summoner earlier today who has managed to pass 6 of the 8 trails the council came up with despite not having much proper training. You could hear a pen drop at the silence that followed the statement, and at Konunger's test he was found compatible to all 3 sage modes. Dracula then whipped out the contract scroll in a dramatic manner, receiving laughter from the other council members and a coughed, "Show off," from Medusa. With the scroll in hand, Dracula commanded, "Sing your name in blood in the box and stamp your fingerprints in your dominant hand." Drax sent him back to Training Ground 2 after he signed the scroll, telling him to be summoned in an hour. They then spoke with the other summons to find out who wanted him to take the final 2 tests before he could be summoned, or something similar. As he waited for an hour, he reflected on how strange the past 2 days had been. He was still unsure of how he had arrived at the monster's domain. He was beginning to attempt to recall the teacher's words regarding summons, but he was failing miserably. Perhaps he ought to have listened. Who cares? Everything worked out, and he will definitely pay attention the next time he attends the academy. After observing that an hour had gone by, he decided to perform the boar dog bird monkey ram jutsu. He bit his thumb and yelled summoning jutsu, conjuring images of Dracula as he channeled his chakra into the technique. After a puff of smoke, Drac appeared in all his vampire splendor. He said to the exhausted and panting Naruto, "Whoa kid. We need to teach you some chakra control stat. You used enough chakra to summon a Pep, Kapala, Nayan, and Ness while also giving them a decent amount of chakra each still. But all the academy teachers tell me I am not putting enough chakra into the clone jutsu, so I thought I would need to use as much as I could muster." The blonde exclaimed, clearly frustrated. "We can worry about that later in your training. For now let's go see your Hokage," Dracula said, scowling but putting it aside with a mental sigh. Drac chose to transform into bat and rest in the blonde's shaggy head as they were walking through the town. Upon noticing the glares, he wondered if this was related to the biju that was sealed inside of him. He made the decision to ask the Hokage this question. The sun was just beginning to rise over the wall as they got closer to the Hokage building, piercing the pitch-black night with the promises and pleasures of the day. The bat saw more glares as the blonde ascended the stairs, but it also caught the secretary's kind, concerned smile as she turned to face the bat-shaped vampire with a suspicious and inquisitive expression. After receiving confirmation that the Hokage was not in a meeting, Naruto entered the room with a slightly agitated Dracula cuddling his hair for solace. The Hokage sighed because it was Sunday and they still hadn't located Naruto in the summon realm. Enma hadn't reported whether the next few clans had spotted the small rapscallion, but he was growing agitated. The object of his distress entered the office, sat down on the chair across from him, and placed a small bat on his head just as he was ready to call Enma for a progress report. They checked the Bat clan yesterday, so that can't be correct. He discovered it wasn't from the Bat clan when the Bat spoke. Its voice was ancient and authoritative as it said, "Make the masked guards go and summon the current Monkey King." "What is one of his kind doing here?" Enma screamed angrily, spitting out the words, "his kind," after he obeyed the order and signaled the guards outside. The elderly Hokage was taken aback because he had never witnessed Enma so enraged, not even toward his mischievous pupil, who only received a negative response upon being called. The Bat responded without responding to the monkey's words, saying, "I will only speak when that last man in the vents is gone and a barrier is put up to cancel this delicate conversation." Before more could be said, Enma vanished and then reappeared holding a dead root Anbu unit. Enma growled, "Hiruzen put up the barrier, he owes answers." The elderly man asked, "Do you want me to get Kakashi and Guy in here because they have summons too?" As Dracula hummed in contemplation, the Bat man replied, "Only if we have a barrier to block sight and sound in a big area with a lake." The monkey became enraged and remained silent, understanding that the dog and tortoise clans would also demand answers. With a nod, Hiruzen moved to the perfect spot and dispatched 2 messenger monkeys to deliver the message to the 2 ninjas about Naruto, summons, and Hokage Lake. After 10 minutes, Hokage Lake. Near the lake, the 4-person group spotted 3 men, 2 Konoha ninjas and a ninja wearing a headband with the kanji for oil. Even the Hokage was unaware that Jiraiya had returned to the village, so he was the only one who surprised everyone among Kakashi, Guy, and Jiraiya. Drac, still in bat form, spoke to the Hokage as they approached the center. He pointed to the other 3 and said, "Put the barrier up, then summon a member of your summon clan that you trust with your life. It doesn't have to be the boss of the clan." Hiruzen raised the barrier as requested, though he was a little uncomfortable being dictated to. He turned to see Pakun and Ningame from Kakashi and Guy, respectively, but was startled to see Fukasaku and Shima with Jiraiya. After sensing the boy's distress, Drac whispered to Naruto, "Now if you can get a chakra pill ready, we'll begin after Naruto summons the rest of the council." He repeated the steps as a result. He bit his thumb and yelled summoning jutsu, picturing the rest of the council as he poured out as much chakra as he could. Boar dog bird monkey ram. He could see that Ness was a startling 49 feet long from the tip of his tail to his head, with a 5-foot tail and a 10-foot neck, making his body 34 feet long. The council appeared in 7 plumes of smoke, but there was no water to conceal the height difference. Ness appeared to be as tall and thick as a train from the snow country. As comfortable as the other summons could be with that clan on the opposite side of the field once all the summons and humans had settled in. The dense atmosphere was broken when Dracula decided enough was enough and transformed back into a human. He broke the silence with a sigh and a rational defense of their clan's honor. "I know we are not well liked by the other summons, but don't hold that against us. The little ones should have paid more attention to the boundary rules set up around the time of the 9-tailed beast's creation." Shima objected before Enma could lose his temper, indicating that this was a mistake. As Dracula sighed, Konunga interrupted him to say, "The rules state that any summon who leaves their borders are able to be hunted by any other summon who would care to, but only in the designated neutral zones, so all the young ones were free game when the hunting party stumbled upon them." He looked Enma square in the eyes, daring to break the rule because the elemental continent was regarded as neutral territory. Aside from Gamamaru, no one else remembers the terms set up by the summons of that time, so we could not particularly enforce or spread them like you would think. "What exactly is your contract?" "I thought it was the bat at first, but I was clearly wrong," Kakashi said, waving his gloved hand at the entire council. "We are the monster contract, a contract that was made before even the toad contract. We are even older than the tailed beasts," Dracula said, stepping aside to make room for someone else. "Before the integration of chakra, before even this continent, there was a world that thrived with technology more advanced than yours, that had the power to white out something the size of the elemental nations in a matter of seconds." Medusa spoke. "But they misused this power, and during the fallout of World War III we got created by the aftereffects of their weapons." Ness said, "But we were hunted, so we self-exiled ourselves to an island having little contact with the world till after World War IV, which wiped almost all human life off the planet except for on this island." Zevon said, picking at his teeth with a claw. "So we took over what used to be known as America, but then other animals started to mutate and make clans, so we called a meeting with these clans to discuss borders, and after many debates we came up with the current clan borders. Frank said. Then Kaguya went and ate the sacred fruit from the world tree that was here on the island and gained the ability to use chakra. She later gave birth to twin boys, Hagoromo and Hamura, also known as the Sage of the Six Paths, and his lesser-known brother, respectively. Sato stated boredly. Skip about 20 years. Kaguya was afraid that her sons were going to overthrow her and release the captives at the recuperating tree, so she melded with the tree and transformed into the first-tailed beast, the 10 tails, to recoup her chakra she passed to her children. Narmer continued while re-wrapping his bandages. Since he's been summoned. But the sage and his brother defeated the 10 tails with the help of the boss summoned from our clan and sealed her away into the sage, making him the first Jinchuriki. He later split the 10 tails into the other 9-tailed beasts, giving each of them a conscience and will of their own. The group. Both the summons and the humans were stunned. That was a lot of information to process, but Sarutobi recovered first. And where exactly is the boss summon? Was the first of many questions that would undoubtedly follow. He's sleeping, recuperating the energy he lost in the fight with the yacht by no Akuma Usagi, who might I mention is stronger than all of the other 9-tailed beasts combined, said Dracula. It was time to leave after the council had addressed many more queries. Before she too poofed back home, Sato remarked, "Hey kid, you passed my trail. Summoning all of us is a tough task, so you definitely have good endurance." He had received the monster contract 2 years prior. And having everyone from the contract train him for those 2 years straight couldn't have made him happier. He was simply pleased that Hiruzen had allowed him to train with the summons rather than making him attend the academy like the others. His acquisition of the Shadow Clone Jutsu was the only thing more thrilling than that. No Jutsu flashback. Hey Hiruzen, why can't Naruto do the clone Jutsu? Medusa inquired as she observed Naruto's unsuccessful attempt to climb the tree while balancing 3 leaves on his body. While puffing on his pipe, the Hokage inquired, "Well, is he putting enough chakra into the jutsu?" "Well, I would sure hope so. Even with almost half a year of nothing but chakra control training, he still put way too much chakra into the summoning technique. He put enough chakra to summon me, the Siren Sisters, Cerberus, Basil, and a handful of gargoyles if he wasn't thinking of me and me alone," she exclaimed, her hair waving like snakes in the air. As he disappeared toward the Hokage Tower in search of the Scroll of Seals, the Sarutobi hummed, "Maybe he needs a more chakra-taxing technique, and I think I know the perfect jutsu." He returned a few minutes later carrying a scroll the size of Naruto's back. He unfolded it to reveal only the initial jutsu. He waved the boy toward him and said, "Naruto, come here. I think I got a clone jutsu substitute fit for someone with your chakra capacity." He practiced for 2 hours before he understood the theory well enough to attempt chakra using a Shout of Shadow clone jutsu and a cross-shaped hand seal. There were 3,000 clones in the clearing. Out of sheer shock, Medusa and the Hokage both passed out. Jutsu Kai, no flashback. Following that, they studied all forms of history, including the shinobi world and the past world, after learning about how their memory transfer affected them. However, the mythology of the ancient world was his favorite subject to read and study. He would read about all the various monsters in the contract, and after studying one, he would call forth the corresponding entity to determine which myths matched their true abilities. For the remainder of that year, the council only allowed him to read history or other materials that would be beneficial to his career, despite his requests to use them to train his abilities and other skills. But ultimately gave in to expedite the process after making minimal progress in chakra control. After using 2,000 shadow clones for 6 months, they were able to gain some control over his chakra. This was still insufficient to use a significant amount of the jutsu they intended to teach him, but whatever. However, the final 6 months before graduation were devoted to learning skills that would be useful for missions, like hunting, identifying genjutsu, correctly curing meats and water, and 5 non-elemental jutsu. While clones study politics, history, international law, and negotiating strategies, they also occasionally practice chakra control. However, this was no time to continue thinking back on the previous 2 years of training. He needed to pass this graduation exam in order to become a genin. Additionally, Frank stated that a month or so after his graduation exam, he would be permitted to take his test. The writing test only includes a few math problems and questions about the history of shinobi. Studying economics, chemistry, history, and other subjects like economics and meteorology made that test easy. He never spent much time throwing weapons because most summons don't use range. He only received a 6 out of 10 with Shuriken and a 7 out of 10 with Kunai. The throwing test was terrible, requiring only 5 out of 10 to pass that session. Taijutsu was dull. He was reserving the monster's Tiding Fist until he had his team, so he performed the Academy Basic style against Iruka. Before the damnable clone jutsu, he passed the 3 jutsu tests. To his chagrin, he replaced Mizuki with a body switch and changed into a tiny Apep, giving the Chunin heart attacks when they could actually interact with the transformation and realize it was a giant snake. In response to his question about whether shadow clones would be permitted, Mizuki stated, "The test states that the student be able to make 3 operable clones using the clone jutsu, and if they couldn't they will be failed and put in a remedial course." Well, I can't use that pathetic excuse for a jutsu at such low a level, so why can't I use a better improved version? Naruto countered. For what seemed like at least an hour, they argued endlessly about legal jargon and requirements related to graduation that Iruka didn't understand. Mizuki ultimately prevailed and created Naruto as a typical clone. Naruto used a humph to perform the hand seals and invoke clone jutsu with the least amount of chakra possible. He created 3 paper white clones that appeared to be on the verge of collapsing, which was a significant improvement over the previous attempt but still insufficient to pass. He was attempting to figure out how to convey this information to the council while sitting on the swing mop, or more precisely, how to do so without them wanting to turn the academy into rubble. "Look, I respect your knowledge of the Konoha laws. So just for that, I want to tell you of another way you can pass," Mizuki said. Hook. Not even the 4th Hokage could pass this test when he was a kid. He went on. Line. He looked directly into his eyes and said, "Plus, I'll see if I can't get permission to tell you why you are disliked by the village. Sinker. Steal the scroll of seals from the Hokage's library. Then take it to this shack in Training Ground 23 and learn a jutsu from it." Okay, he knows how to tell the council about this now. After that, he discovered a remote training area with a sizable lake. After using summoning jutsu, the council is in front of him. "Getting better, but you're still using too much. Now did you pass?" Dracula asked before getting right to the point. "No, all because I couldn't make 3 normal clones. But I was offered a test that would still allow me to pass." Naruto responded. "Oh, and that would be?" Dracula asked, barely controlling his rage at the academy for failing him on such a basic jutsu. "Mizuki approached me about a test I haven't heard about. It's where I take the Forbidden Scroll and learn 1 jutsu from it. He also said he'll see if he can get permission to tell me why I am disliked by the village." "Isn't that great?" Following her piece, Medusa said, "I would consult the Hokage and see what he recommends." "Drac, why don't you go with him? We'll go back and let the rest know they might be summoned." This was followed by Dracula and the other council members. The dynamic pair prepared for a lengthy meeting as they headed to the Hokage office. Still staring at his paperwork, the Hokage asked, "So what do I owe the pleasure?" The Hokage was immediately drawn to Dracula's complaint. Naruto failed the graduation test. He said, "Report," in what the village ninja called his Hokage voice. "After having a legal argument with Chunin instructor Mizuki, I was told to use the normal clone jutsu, which as you know doesn't work for me. Then after the academy let out, I was approached by Mizuki, who told me of a way to pass by breaking in and stealing the Forbidden Scroll and taking it to Training Ground 23. He also stated that he would tell me why I am hated by the village," he said with a few breaths before silence returned. "So Mizuki is a traitor, but what would you recommend we do?" Hiruzen asked, eager to get the blonde's opinion. Hiruzen was impressed that he had thought of a good plan so quickly. "Well, why not give me a different scroll and put an advanced genjutsu on it too advanced for him to detect or break? Then either a squad of summons or a squad of Anbu capture him as he arrives on scene." "Dracula, what team of summons would you suggest to do this capture?" "I would recommend a Kelpie, the Siren Sisters, and the Obsidian Gargoyles." The vampire replied. "Obsidian?" inquired Hiruzen. "The Sirens to draw his attention and get him in a spot where the Gargoyles can get him to the Kelpie, which would take a cage amount of chakra to break its hold. There are different teams of Gargoyles. The Obsidian happen to have a great amount of pain tolerance and are the second fastest team of Gargoyles." Dracula clarified as Naruto jotted down, "I say Naruto uses those summons, they have a higher chance than an Anbu team of 4+. I bet they would love some action." The Hokage laughed. "As for the scroll, I have one that might help with your chakra control issue." "Tell me, what have either of you heard about the inner gates?" he asked. As he remembered and repeated what the books would say, Naruto's eyes snapped open. The inner gates are able to turn an average Joe Schmoy into someone as strong as a cage for a limited time if all 8 are open by allowing the body access to the chakra it usually restricts naturally. But how does this help with my control? The blonde knucklehead concluded by tilting forehead. What would happen if you opened the first 2 gates then worked on solely chakra exercises? Hiruzen asked. Dracula was the first to figure it out. He would be able to control his chakra better at a higher percentage of chakra than when the gates were shut he could control the much more limited chakra with a finer point so to speak. Hiruzen said, picturing Naruto's gaping expression at the implications, correct this is the way my female student Tsunade gained her perfect control for her medical jutsu. So the scroll I am going to give you will tell you how to unlock the first 2 gates. It would also be a good idea to go through your taijutsu style with it because it also augments the speed and strength. Naruto and Dracula head to the training ground to set their trap and begin training after settling on the last few details. With a shout of summoning jutsu and the blood seals. 5 pitch-black gargoyles stood 8 feet tall, each with folded wings that appeared to be 10 feet across from tip to tip if fully extended, and a sea-green-haired horse appeared next to 3 human women, one with blonde hair, one with pitch-black hair, and the last with red hair, all of which were forms of beauty. The blonde siren remarked, Naruto, you still have too much chakra. By how much, Agalope? He asked the other blonde, his head hanging. Agalope laughed at his sad expression and said, not as much as normal. You still had enough to summon Cerberus and Basil, but you're doing better. Her 2 sisters, Thelxipia, the redhead, and Piscino, the black-haired one, quickly followed. With a commanding voice that made it clear why he was on the council, Dracula said, after Naruto picks himself up out of his sadness at overloading the technique again, we can get down to business. We are setting up a trap for a traitor who sabotaged Naruto's test, making him fail. If we pull this off, he passes with the marks he should have been given. With a nod of approval from everyone in attendance except Naruto, who helped create the plan, the pseudo-boss said, we decided that we'll divert him long enough for the sirens to begin their song, giving the gargoyles enough time to grab him and put him on Coco, and restrain his hands tight. Mizuki was beginning to worry. Since he hasn't heard that the demon brat stole the scroll, he was going to confirm that he would carry out the plan by first checking the meet-up spot and then the brat's apartment. Imagine how shocked he was to see the brat and the well-dressed, pale man staring at the scroll he had given him. The pale man wouldn't be an issue, he would simply murder them both and receive Orochimaru's reward. However, he heard women singing as soon as he made his presence known and they both turned to face him. He was drawn to the singing for no apparent reason. He saw 3 bombshells of women after hopping a few trees over and unintentionally being in the precise location where he needed to be for the trap. He was aware that he would receive additional benefits €1, possibly even one of the girls themselves €1, if he brought Orochimaru these girls. Mizuki was about to speak when the blonde started to fiddle with her hair a bit, signaling the gargoyles to start their part. The white-headed Chunin was suddenly trapped. With his hands and feet pinned to the side of the horse and unable to bring them together to perform any hand seals, the gargoyles pinned him from the stomach up to the back of the horse. They went to inform the Hokage of their success after capturing him. The blonde is informed by Coco and the Obsidian Battalion that they will have his amber earplugs ready for the next time, so he won't need to rely on other summons to ensure he doesn't fall under the same ninjutsu as their victims, after the Siren Sisters vanish in a cloud of smoke and deliver him to T&I. Hiruzen, Dracula, and Naruto are left alone in the office to talk about the events and consequences of what will be called the Scroll Incident. Report, Hiruzen said, focusing on Naruto's eyes. We spent the hour and a half between when we set up the trap to work on me getting the first 2 gates to open at command. Progress with that is I can open both for about 30 minutes. The trap worked flawlessly and succeeded in bringing Chunin traitor Mizuki into custody. The blonde stated with professionalism. Hiruzen turned to the third person in the room and said, anything else to add? Dracula, now's the time. Dealing with this, no. On other personal matters, yes. Dracula looked at the elderly Hokage and asked if they had finished discussing the capture. The leader nodded, and the vampire resumed, saying, after Naruto gets his team, the council formally requests that his genin team, their sensei, and you join us for a celebration feast. Dracula expressed his anxiety at the Hokage's rejection and the fact that he would have to deal with a boisterous clan. That's up to his genin teammates and his squad's sensei. I personally am humbled to join you and your clansmen for dinner. Speaking of Team Sayuro, Naruto spoke up. Who's going to be on mine and when is our first meeting? Excitedly, Hiruzen laughs and says, "You will find that out in 2 days. I have a meeting tomorrow to plan the teams and then you meet the day after." After a few moments of silence, the Hokage said, "Say Naruto, would you mind calling Dracula here tomorrow so he can attend the meeting, just so if you're placed with clan members, they can make amends with their respective summons. It's not our fault everyone forgot the contract made Susans of years ago." Dracula said, becoming agitated that everyone had forgotten significant history. "I know, but this would be a step forward to improving your relations with the other clans and will make teamwork between Naruto and any potential teammates." Hiruzen said, almost revealing who he wants to be his teammates. Seeing the logic, Dracula said, "Okay, I'll attend the meeting." He then rounded on Naruto, saying, "Don't think you get the day off. I want you to try and figure out who logically would be put in a team together and give me your reasons after the meeting tomorrow." In order to allow Naruto to rest before calling Dracula once more prior to the team selection meeting, they concluded their conversation. The following day, Dracula said, taking a sip from the canteen he brought and sighing with satisfaction, "You know you might have to start getting up earlier if your team meets early in the morning." Naruto called Dracula after his usual morning routine, having woken up just as the sun was rising. As he finished preparing the eggs for himself, Naruto retorted, "Yeah, well, if I start getting up earlier you might miss your all-important beauty rest." Dracula polished off his canteen and sent it back to the summoning realm, saying, "Yeah, well, you won't have as many training days when you have to do missions all the time, so if you want training from the clan you'll either have to stay up later or wake up earlier." Dracula got up and looked at the wall clock. "I am going to head to the meeting room a little early. I'll find you after it's done. I would suggest summoning Frank and tell him I think you are ready for his strength trail now. However, if you do this you may have to use the power given to you by the 2 inner gates. Just remember the effects it may have on your body. Not that it matters, the little brat has the natural regeneration of some of the higher-ups in the clan." Kurenai said, "Who are we missing?" Hiruzen. "Everyone's here, even Kakashi. He is almost here, just about block away," Hiruzen replied, sensing Dracula's bat form was about to arrive. Dracula landed on Kakashi's hair and turned it into a comfortable resting spot, saying, "Sorry if I am late, the little rascal and I needed to have a conversation about future training after he gets placed in his team." Before anyone could protest, Hiruzen explained to the Jonin why the little bat was present and opened the meeting by saying, "This is Dracula, one of the summons from the students. His clan has the ire of several other clans, so he came to apologize to his summoner's teammates' summons. Now the teams are as follows." As the smoke from the summoning jutsu cleared, Frank's first words were, "Well, this is a surprise." As he stretched to get ready for the test, Naruto remarked, "Dracula said he thinks I am ready for the strength test." "And where is that bothersome bat?" Frank asked after Naruto finished stretching. "He is in a meeting to decide what teams are going to be put together. Gramps asked if he could come to make amends with summons if I get clan kids as my teammates." Frank began, "Well, so the strength test you're going to have to summon team restraints." "Who?" Naruto asked. Frank concluded, "Okay, if you say so." Naruto bit his thumb once more and went over the hand signals. "They have the most strength comparable to mine of the zombies. The goal of the test is to break out of the team and then do an arm wrestle with me immediately after." Calling forth jutsu, there were 4 small gray zombies halfway up his calf, 2 gray zombies about 6 feet tall, and a massive 12-foot tall guy. The shortest of the 4 smallest ones inquired, "What's going on, Frank?" "Naruto is going to take my test, and while normally I would restrain him and then arm wrestle him, I thought it would be better if you guys restrained him." Frank smiled knowingly. With a yellow-toothed smile, Punter said, "Okay, kid, I hope you're ready for this. My name is Punter, by the way. I am the only zombie who can speak on team restraints. The others all lost their tongues decades ago." Naruto exclaimed enthusiastically, "Nice to meet you, Punter." "And I am ready." The 4 tiniest zombies quickly grabbed hold of his hands and ankles, appearing to weigh down the Hokage tower. The 2 medium zombies, one in front of him and one behind him, locked him in by pinning his arms to his sides and preventing him from moving from side to side. The large man who was able to hold him on his shoulders and block his escape route was the most intriguing thing. "We wouldn't normally have this much strength, but we are the only team that gets stronger the more chakra you use. It causes us to gain extra weight and the other 3 extra grip strength. Not even Frank has this unless he's summoned with only hybrid nature chakra." Punter began to speak with his left hand. "Well, that's good to know for when I am in the field." But there is one thing that Frank didn't know before I summoned you guys. Naruto let out a sigh. Frank, sitting on a stump that had been a tree only moments before, questioned, and what wasn't I aware of Naruto? Naruto threw open the two inner gates and exclaimed, last night, I discovered how to open two of them. The abrupt opening of the two gates pushed the large man and the two mediums away, and Naruto needed no more time. He knelt down and swung his two arms back and forth, striking the two smalls around his ankles and the two around his wrists to knock off both sets and essentially release him. He was feeling how much more chakra he was putting into his jutsu, enough to make the smaller ones weigh roughly the same as the Hokage Tower and give the larger three the strength of an elite Jonin. Frank watched in utter amazement that he had managed to break out of the team. Frank elaborated, saying, did you charge all the extra chakra into your muscles when you opened the gates? That's the only way I could see you shaking off the four smalls. Yeah, that was the only way me and Dracula saw me passing your strength test. Said Naruto. Well, if you can use the first two gates, I'd say your strength is plenty enough to pass my test. So, if you want to close them now and I'll tell the clan. Do you want me to take your cloak back before your graduation dinner? Replied Frank. Before disappearing with the rest of the group, Dracula remarked, that would be lovely, Frank. Also, can you tell the clan we'll be having 3 summon bosses over Enma, Carla, and Komatao. Naruto was left to train alone for the remainder of the afternoon. They were all those who had passed the graduation exam and were going to be put on a team. Most of the time, a typical civilian child believed that becoming a ninja would help them become famous. However, 8 of Tama Yuro, Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, Ino Yamanaka, Shikamaru Nara, Choji Akamichi, Hinata Hyuga, Kiba Inuzuka, and Shino Aburame Yuro, showed more potential than the others. Naruto Uzumaki, the current and sole owner of the monster summoning contract, is dressed in a white fur shirt with yellow bandages around his arms and legs and seaweed green scale shorts that reach his knees. He continued to wonder who his team might be and whether they would accept him for his summon contract while he waited for the teacher to arrive. The door opened and Aruka, the head teacher of the class he was in and was meant to be in before learning of the contract, entered before his thoughts could continue. All right, class, settle down and I'll call out the teams. The majority of the students were too preoccupied with chatting in their friend groups to give the traumatized teacher any attention. Aruka said, sit down and listen up, you brats, with his head roughly 10 times larger and a tick mark for being disregarded. Team 7 Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and Choji Akamichi. Team 8 Hinata Hyuga, Ino Yamanaka, Kiba Inuzuka. Team 9 is still in circulation from last year, making the last team. Team 10 with Naruto Uzumaki, Shikamaru Nara, and Shino Aburame. It's been fun teaching you all and I wish you all the best of luck. Your instructors should arrive in about an hour. Aruka dismissed them. Without saying anything, Shino went to Naruto's row and they both went to pick up their third teammate. The 3 new teammates were getting to know one another outside under a tree close to the sparring rings. After leaving the classroom for lunch, there was a semi-awkward silence. Naruto began by asking, so, why do you guys think we got put into a team together? Well, from what I know of Shino and his clansmen, they are typically long-range fighters with tracking skills, so my assumption is that is his role on this team. After Shino nodded, Shikamaru continued, my clan usually are mid-range fighters with more of a tactical mindset. That would mean you are more than likely plugged in for being our close-range fighter with a different role depending on who your sensei is. Shikamaru finished his lunch and got ready to head back to wait for their sensei. They didn't have to wait long because 2 more Jonin entered shortly after lunch, after the majority of the civilian children had been shuffled out by unremarkable Jonin, leaving just the 9 teenagers. One was a woman wearing a white dress with a red ribbon trim and a red arm covering on her right arm. She spun on her heel and walked straight back out the door after saying, teammate, follow me. With the exception of the 2 trench blades at his hip and the purple sash around his waist bearing the kanji for 12, the other person to enter was a man with black, spiky hair that was tied to a full but well-groomed beard. The man put a cigarette in his mouth and turned to go, saying, Team 10, follow me. He had now gathered his team. They reached their assigned training ground after walking for about 10 minutes. There were a few practice dummies, a circle of flat rocks to provide seating, a small, shallow, and serene stream that flowed through the center of the training area and led to a pond that was barely visible in the distance, and trees that made up the majority of the landscape surrounding the clearing's edge. Asuma lit the cigarette, sat on one of the stones, and gestured for them to follow suit. Alrighty, tell us a little about yourselves, likes, dislikes and the sort. After a short silence, Naruto said, well, my name is Naruto Uzumaki, my likes are my summons and training, and my dislikes are traitors and people who can't tell the difference between a kunai and a scroll. When Shikamaru realized it was his turn next, he said, my name is Shikamaru Nara, my likes are my clan members and tending to the family deer, my dislike is anything I deem troublesome. With a low buzzing sound emanating from him, Shino said, my name is Shino Aburame, my likes are my clan and insects, my dislikes are pesticides and people who kill insects for no reason. Right, well, my name is Asuma Sarutobi, my likes are my fellow Jonins and my clan, my dislikes are elders who can't let go of the past and perverts. Asuma said before going on, so, this team as with all other teams made this year are supposed to be well-rounded, so we have Shino for tracking and wearing down the enemy, Shikamaru to capture and hold the enemy, and Naruto who will be our jack of all trades, so I'm told because of his summons. He stops for a smoke break, so your task to officially become Genin is simple. You have 3 options. You can track down and capture Kakashi to find and burn his stash of books, replace the Hokage's stash of tobacco with these mushrooms, or find and get Kurenai to tell you her crush's name. Asuma raises an eyebrow but nods in agreement, and Naruto says, we chose to replace the stash of tobacco with the mushrooms. After some debate, he hands the children the bag to replace the tobacco. His final words were, find me after you're done, as he unintentionally disappeared to follow the Genin and observe how this transpired. When the recent graduates are left on their own, they begin talking about how to complete this assignment. Naruto asks, so, what is the plan? Shikamaru holds his hands in an inverted semicircle and says, I believe our best bet would be to have you and me as a distraction as Shino's bugs exchange what our objective is. Both of his teammates nod, and they head to the tower to discuss various strategies for diverting the elderly Kage's attention. Hey old man, you haven't forgotten about the dinner tonight, I hope? Naruto asks in a sickly sweet voice, causing the Hokage to gulp and perspire as they enter the office, with the exception of Shino, who is using a female bug he planted on Naruto to guide his insects through the ventilation shafts with the bag of mushrooms. Of course not, and I have already had a long talk with Enma to be on his utmost best behavior tonight. He laughs. Hey, would you and your family like to come to diner tonight as well? You could even bring you summon over. Naruto exclaims as he turns to face Shikamaru. That's great to hear because you know how they would have reacted if you were a no-show to the dinner. Yeah, I'll have to ask my parents though. The fact you know of the Nara clan's connection to the deer contract is remarkable considering no one really summons them anymore. Shikamaru responds. He was about to respond when Shino and Asuma entered. Sorry, I was just in the restroom. Also, yes, I would have to talk to my parents as well for the dinner party. Shino responds, that's cool how you can talk to insects. Did you have some on me to hear about the dinner invite? Naruto responds, yes, as to why I planted a bug on you is because I haven't been in the Hokage Tower much and didn't want to get lost is all. Shino replied to the Hokage's query prior to asking that. Are you going to invite the insect summons? And are you going Asuma-sensei? Wouldn't miss it for the world, kid, replies Asuma. Asuma uses hand seals behind his back to tell his father not to smoke until he returns, and they all leave the Hokage's office after turning to Shino and receiving a nod in agreement. Asuma instructs them to report back to the training field. We broke off into 2 teams. Team A, which served as a distraction so Team 2 could slip the bag of mushrooms in place of the normal tobacco. Naruto began. Then after which Team A consisting of Naruto and I went into the Hokage's office to pose a situation that would demand most of his attention, drawing them from the surrounding to us. Shikamaru went on. Then using the female beetle I planted on Naruto during our walk there, I brought the mushrooms using my beetles to the desk and swapped out the tobacco for it. Once that was done I went to go in and you followed behind me. Shino said. Asuma was happy because his team was going to do amazing things. Asuma said, well, to start off, you passed the tests were designed to test teamwork because only when you worked together did you actually accomplish the mission. They said to meet at the Hokage Tower at 7:30 p.m., Naruto said, remembering the time Dracula had given him. Now what time is the dinner, Naruto? Asuma asked. He put his hand out to Shino and asked, so, you're all dismissed until then. Now I have to go report to the Hokage about you passing your exam, so may I have his tobacco back please? Asuma hurried off to the Hokage Tower to report on his team after they said their goodbyes and parted ways for the time being. In less than 10 minutes, he was kneeling in front of his father, anticipating his report. How did they do, Asuma, and why did you tell me not to smoke until you come back? Hiruzen inquired. The old Cage looked in his drawer to find the bag of mushrooms and was very happy that he had heeded his son's advice to abstain from smoking until he returned. Well, I gave them 3 options for their teamwork test. One was to capture Kakashi and find then burn his book stash, the Cage said, sending a shiver down his spine. The second was to find Kurenai and find out her crush, he said, sweating profusely at his son's obvious crush. Hiruzen asked, and how did they exactly do this? As he returned the mushrooms for his tobacco. Well, they had Shino exchange it while you were distracted with Naruto. Asuma replied, mentally noting that he should return the mushrooms to the hospital prior to dinner. Later that evening, everyone who had been invited to the diner was waiting outside the tower 10 minutes before the scheduled time. Everyone except Naruto, who would show up in a big show. There was a puff of smoke as the clock struck 7:30, and then 2 bats circled him, beginning at his feet and disappearing in puffs of smoke after passing his head. As for what he is wearing is a pair of crimson ninja sandals that led into a pair of black ninja pants with his 8 sage circles going down the outside of his pants, with the first ring being black with a thin lining of red on the inside on a patch of mahogany-colored cloth to make it visible. The second looking like that of a snake eating its tail with a forest and emerald green back and white underbelly. The third had an outside of a faded yellow with a gray-green color accenting. The fourth was a mini plesiosaur curled in on itself with a sea-green color. The fifth ring looked like an albino white werewolf in a curve with a half-moon that gave of the appearance of it chasing the moon. The sixth ring was a stone gray with a brown wooden bark color lining the inside of the ring. The seventh ring was bleached bone white and gave the appearance of being composed of actual bones. The last ring was comprised of a gray flesh color with black stitches running in a crisscross pattern along the ring. For future reference, this is how the circles now look. He also had yellow bandages wrapped around the bottom of his legs following the final circle. A white fur utility belt with kunai and shuriken sealed inside and plenty of additional space for future tools and weapons held his pants up. A crimson-orange fox head with the kanji for 9 on its forehead was displayed on a sea-green scaled shirt that was wrapped in a black cloak and had 8 circles on his back. Now this diner is going to take place in my summons realm. The boss of each of your clans was invited and has already shown up and started talking among the others. Now if you all will so kindly put your hands on my shoulder, I shall take you there as well, he said after making sure they had finished examining his new attire. The elderly Cage, Shikamaru, and his family grasped his left shoulder, while Asuma, Shino, and his family grasped his right shoulder once he had finished. He performed the summoning jutsu while everyone was grasped, and they all disappeared in a puff of smoke. When the smoke cleared, they found themselves in a beautifully furnished stone room with 2 doors, one with a seaweed green rug in front of it and the other with a handle that resembled a shrunken head. The room included a full-sized bed with blood-red silk sheets and 2 black pillows at the head of the bed, a dresser and a wardrobe, and a full-body mirror with what appeared to be 2 slide-out mirrors that provided a 360-degree view of the wearer. The door with the shrunken head made a knock just as they were done watching. Through the door, Dracula asked, "Are you all ready for dinner?" The clan's getting a little impatient. Both Naruto and Hiruzen quickly usher everyone out into the hall after becoming pale at the implications. He bowed and led the group to the dining room, saying, "Ah, good to see you all. My name is Dracula, and I'm the acting boss of the Monster Summoning Clan. Now, if you will follow me to the dining hall." The group could hear the terrifying chatter coming from the other side of the door as they got closer. Pun entirely intended. The group of humans, with the exception of Naruto, are stunned by what they see as the doors swing open. The greatest variety of creatures must have been directly in front of them, and as the halls descend, there are more tables. Now as the last of our guests arrive, we hold this feast for the prominence of tomorrow, as our summoner has taken the first step in becoming a ninja, and so we shall celebrate like there is not tomorrow tonight, and come morning we will train to fight for battles yet to come as we fight alongside our summoner as we aid him in his time of need and bring with us a new age of prosperity for young Naruto. Dracula said as he sat down. Now let us give a hearty toast to new friends and allies from the Beetle clan led by Komatau, the Deer clan led by Carla, and last but not least the Monkey clan led by Enma. Dracula said as the party geared up in full swing. The Cage tapped Dracula's shoulder while the group was berating him and asked if he could say a few words. The elderly Cage nodded his head and let out a single, attention-grabbing shout. As of Naruto officially becoming a genin, I am now permitted, as per his parents' will, to give him all of his mother's belongings consisting of a small cabin and scrolls containing who knows what. My best guess is that it would be what the Uzumaki clan was known for, which was sealing. After saying that, the professor sat down again to continue consuming the delicious food that had been served at the feast. Well, thank you for that information, Hiruzen. Now with that information we can more focus on what section of the clan for him to study under first. Dracula replied. As a result, there were numerous loud splashes coming from further down the hall, and Ness was grinning menacingly. With a hint of melancholy in his voice, Dracula said, thanks to that information he can start tutelage under Ness and all the other monsters under the water portion of the contract. What do you mean start training under the water portion of the clan? Replied Hiruzen. Well, you see, when he signed the contract and passed all the tests, we wouldn't start his actual ninja training until he became a genin, hence why we had him learn history and whatnot, said Dracula. I'll take over from here, Drac. Now we held a meeting to determine how ninja training would actually go, because of the fact that while he could make enough clones to learn everything at a fast rate, all that information has a large chance of making him like the boss. Ness continued. So to avoid this scenario we decided we would have him train by a branch of the contract which could then train him in all of their fields of expertise before moving to the next group. We were going to make it a contest of sorts and each present a gift that he could accept and then train under that branch, and we will still provide those gifts when he gets to that section of the contract. Ness finished before turning to Dracula, and the reason he will start with the water contract is that they have one of our two seal masters, the other as part of the Japanese section of the contract. He replied, we have Carl, pronounced as did Ness, and we have Kira, Sato replied. And the reason you start with the water contract and not the Japanese is because Kira has a more advanced version of sealing that requires what Carl can teach young Naruto, explained Frank. So what was the water clan's gift? Inquired Asuma. We of the water clan have made together a shield of shed scales that can repair any damage to it as long as there is water nearby, and the shield has at least one scale left. It is also lightweight and can stop all but well-crafted blades and blades enhanced with wind or earth chakra, Ness boasted. Following the announcement, the celebration resumed, with the water clan members making even more noise because they would be the first to train their summoner. Do you think it's time he meets the boss of the contract? Drac asked the other council members, and they all nodded. Then he made another announcement. My fellow clansmen and women, I and the rest of the council believe it is time for our summoner to meet the boss of the contract. Everyone roared in agreement, and the gargoyles and dragons overhead performed some aerial tricks. Dracula led the three boss summonses and the human group to the meeting hall. As he made his way down the stairs to the others, he remarked, the boss of the contract has been asleep since before the nine-tailed beasts were created by the Sage of the Six Paths. The light from the torches dimmed after they left, and it only slightly increased as they passed. We hid him away down here for protection in case any other summon were to cause a war with us or form a rivalry like the Toad and Snake clan. He went on. As they descended the spiral staircase, the only sound they could hear was their footsteps. Eventually, they reached a landing with a massive cherry wood door that was easily 35 feet tall and another set of stairs that led directly down. What's down those stairs? Asked Naruto. Those lead to a seal system set up by Kira to call back monsters that used to be part of the contract, but when they found out the boss wasn't waking up till we had a summoner, they struck out on their own and said that when we have an actual summoner and the boss was awake, could we call them back? Dracula responded, so what exactly is the boss of the contract? Hiruzen inquired. He opened the door silently. Even the bosses of the summoning clan gasped. Wait a moment, I remember reading about him, or at least his myth. Exclaimed Naruto. Is he a cockatrice? He asked. The one and only. Dracula grinned, but his mind was racing with what he had been witnessing. Is it possible that all that excess chakra he's been putting into the summoning jutsu has actually been the boss refilling his reserves? He asked. So, what's his name? Naruto interrupted Drac's thoughts, saying, that is a question he has to deem you worthy for when he wakes up. Everyone fell silent to consider what they were witnessing, and it was an absolutely amazing sight. His breathing has gotten lighter and he's actually looking very healthy again. A 55-foot-long jumble of animal parts lay in front of them. It had a rooster's head, a reptile's body, a snake's tail, 3 long gashes across its eye, and what appeared to be folded dragon wings to its side with rooster legs and feet. Asuma pointed to a row of bookcases beyond the powerful boss, each shelf crammed with books, and said, Hey, I see some books back there, what is in those? When the seals decided his brain was stable enough to begin returning his memories, Dracula said, those are his memories, Kira also removed them and put them in books so as to take strain off his brain while he heals and to ensure he didn't forget any when he woke up. He looked around and saw that 5 of the original 50 bookcases were gone, indicating that he had absorbed the knowledge back in. Now let us get back to the celebration, he exclaimed. Everyone turned around at that point, strolled back to the party, and spent the remainder of the evening having fun. Team 10 is waiting for their sensei to arrive at their training ground at 7 in the morning the following day. After 10 minutes, a cloud of smoke containing their sensei emerges in front of them. Alright team, this is how I figured we would set up the training every other day. When we're not on C-rank missions or above, we will train together as a team in the morning and do a handful of D-rank missions till we have the required 30 as a team to go on a C-rank mission, Asuma said. Then on that off day we will each be training individually, Naruto with his summons, and Shikamaru and Shino with their clans, now saying that I will be taking those days to train myself on this field, and so if you need help with anything during those days you'll know where to find me, he concluded. Naruto inquired, so what day is today? Today we will do some teamwork exercise until lunch, then pick up a few missions, replied Asuma. 5 hours later, Shino and Shikamaru were panting heavily, Naruto appeared to be wheezing, and Asuma had a faintly sweet sheen. Now that we got it out of the way, we'll rest and eat lunch until 1, then we'll go to the mission's office. The team is standing in front of the mission room, prepared to embark on their first mission, less than half an hour later. Before Asuma could respond, the Chunin stood behind the counter and said, "May we have the farmer's field and catch Tora to start, please?" Well, for missions today we have clean up a farmer's field of rocks, catch Tora, walk the Inuzuka's hounds, clean the Inuzuka's kennels, mow a counselor's grass, and babysit an ambassador's kid while he's at a meeting. The Chunin handed Asuma the scrolls and said, "All right, here you are. Do you mind if I ask why the catch Tora mission?" Naruto laughed and said, "Because I have just the thing to catch the little devil." After arriving at the last known location of Tora's sighting, Shikamaru asked, "All right Naruto, what's your plan?" As the young team set out to capture Tora first and foremost. "Well, we have 2 options to track her down and 2 options to capture her," he started, "and since this is supposed to be teamwork based, we will have a combination of the 2. We will have a group of my summons and Shino's bugs track it down, and then my summons will surround it stealthily and cut off any routes of escape. Then I figured, Shikamaru, you could catch it with your shadow possession, and I'll carry the thing back." "What summon are you going to use?" Asuma asked. "Summoning jutsu," Naruto said, and when the smoke vanished only Asuma and Naruto could see what was happening. "What happened? Nothing's there." Shikamaru asked. "That's where you were wrong, my insects feel something there, but I don't see it," Shino said, equally as confused. "That's because aside from me being their summoner, they're completely invisible to anyone under Chunin and their target. Though there is a way to circumvent that." After Naruto said that, both Shino and Shikamaru felt something lick their hands, and then the air started wavering and they could now see 9 hellhounds the size of a mountain lion standing right in front of them. They had red name tags, black leather collars, eyes that pierced the very soul, and were as black as a cloud at midnight. These are hellhounds. Originally there were so many that they really didn't have much room on their island to move, so they fought each other until only the 9 before you remained, and just as these 9 were about to fight again, Dracula found the island and brought them back to the clans home, said Naruto. And while they regret most of it, after all, they did become more powerful because of them absorbing all the other souls when they died, and so with that they push forward in their honor. 8 of the hellhounds split up in pursuit of the cat, and Shino used that as his silent cue to release more insects to find Tora. Asuma questioned, "Why did that one stay behind Naruto?" "Well, to lead us to the cat. If one of the other hellhounds finds it, their collars let them communicate with each other over any distance," replied Naruto. Shino questioned, "Can you not communicate with them?" Shino felt compelled to inquire because it seemed strange to him to be unable to hear the dogs. They fell silent after Naruto replied, "No, I can't. Dracula said I'd need a collar just like theirs, but they're trying to see if they can make one like a belt or a bracelet." Both Shino and the hellhound turned their heads in a particular direction after the brief pause, and as the hellhound begins to move in that direction, Shino remarks, "We need to hurry. I think the cat can smell the hounds and is more skittish." "All right, guess I'm up," Shikamaru said as he approached the edge of the clearing and began the jutsu to stretch his shadow, and shadow possession jutsu successful. With the cat frozen there, Naruto picks him up by the scruff and dismisses all but 2 hellhounds. At that point, they rush to see the cat in a clearing, and the hellhounds are just out of a normal person and animal view around the clearing, evenly spaced to cut off lines of escape. As he ensured Tora could see both hellhounds, Naruto said, "They're going to follow in case someone has any ideas about running." Tora wisely chose not to flee or fight, thanks to the company of 2 hellhounds. As he logged down Team 10's successful retrieval of Tora, the Chunin said, "All right, if you could put her into the carrier, we will give her back to the Fire Lord's wife." And off to the fields we go, Naruto exclaimed in a flamboyant manner with a dramatic wave of his hands, making everyone in attendance drool. They arrived at the field in just 10 minutes, and since the capture Tora mission only took an hour, they appeared to be on schedule. The farmer pointed to a 13-acre farm behind them and said, "So, I need this farm free of rocks so I can start making sure the ground is ready for the next planting." He kept drawing their attention back to himself by saying, "Normally I have farm hands to do this, but with a recent sandstorm in Suna destroying all their crops, they all left to go do work over there." "Well, how about we make this interesting," says Naruto. "Out of the 4 of us, whoever picks up and get rid of the least number of rocks and debris has to pay for dinner when we call it a day." Naruto addressed the group. Naruto summoned 4 hellhounds and said, "We each start in a corner, and we start when my summons go poof." Asuma said, "Okay, I'm game." The other 2 nodded. Everyone began working inwards to clean as much of the field as possible after the hellhounds left their corners. Shino used his insects to clear large sections all at once, Asuma used his speed to move at a mid-chunin pace, Shikamaru used his shadow possession to rip any and all debris when he was surrounded by it, and Naruto was doing the most cleaning after calling forth 4 baby rock golems that were only 3 feet tall and calling forth about 1,000 clones. The task was completed in 2.5 hours, making it 4:30 in the afternoon. Asuma, drenched in perspiration, said, "All right, write down how much you cleared, and we'll see who cleared the most." Shino and Shikamaru were both breathing heavily from exhaustion, but they complied with Asuma's request. Naruto appeared to be the most affected of them all, with his labored breathing being the only indication. "Well, the job's done, and I believe we have enough time to do one more mission, Sensei," Naruto said, receiving a mild glare from both of his teammates due to their extreme exhaustion. "Right, and it looks like I'm paying for dinner," Asuma said, rereading the numbers. "They both beat me by 1 thing of debris each." Asuma spoke with a trembling voice. They both sighed when Naruto said, "Oh, stop your stomach ache. The sooner we finish 30 of these chores, the sooner we can go on higher ranked missions. Besides, we should work up a big appetite since Sensei is paying for it." He continued to casually entice the man to complain. The Chunin asks, "So, you have finished 2 missions and want to go on another?" Naruto cheerfully responds, "Yup, we want to finish those 30 prerequisites." He looked at the final 2 scrolls and said, "Well, no new missions have come in yet, but some have been taken. The only ones left are capture Tora and mow some grass at a counselor's house." He whispered to the genin, "In that case we'll take both if you're alright with that." Naruto said, "As long as it's good with your sensei." The Chunin said, seeking confirmation from Asuma, "Why has Tora escaped again?" "Well, you see, it doesn't really like being hugged to death, and that's what she does." He nodded as they departed the tower, and after they were out of sight, he turned to his group. Naruto pivoted and interrupted the dispute between his 2 teammates. "How would we as a team not like to go on DA Euro ranks ever again?" Asuma appeared interested, but both of his teammates remained silent when the idea of never having to do the chores again was brought up. "I can make solid clones which could transform into us and do the D ranks all day as we train on our team days, and as a plus we can get more done in a shorter amount of time and get on C ranks faster than any other team, and all we need to do is visit the office in the morning and from there I'll load the clones with enough chakra to last all day." At this point, Shikamaru and Shino both said, "Let's do it." Following their confirmations, they turned to Asuma and asked if they would grant them permission to carry out this plan. "I would go through with this plan on one condition," he told me. "You practice meditation for the hour before you pop the clones to lessen the effect of the memory backlash," Asuma replied with a grin. To make sure his sensei wouldn't exhibit obvious partiality, Naruto asked, "And what will you be doing during this time?" Asuma concluded, "That was all I needed." Naruto then shouted, "Shadow Clone Jutsu, Summoning Jutsu," and 8 clones appeared, 2 of whom changed into Shino, Shikamaru, and Asuma, and 2 of whom remained as Naruto. "Well, he needs to work on increasing his reserves, so as you are practicing meditation I figured his beetles could sap off of your large chakra reserves, giving Shino's reserves time to build without feeding it all to his bugs." Naruto added, "Now then, as I remember, we are getting treated to dinner, right, sensei?" along with 2 of the hellhounds. Right, those 2 teams, one will catch Tora, the other will go cut grass. On the following training day, Naruto immediately summoned himself in reverse and found himself on a seashore with an ocean in front of him and a sizable freshwater lagoon several miles behind him, rather than in his room at the castle. "Ah, good you're here, Naruto. Follow me," Ness said, raising his head out of the water. He then turned around and appeared to go to a particular location on the water, his head protruding. He spoke once more as he reached a location above the water. "Now we shall start your training for the day, but before we start anything we need you to change cloths to something that will allow faster movement in water," he said, lowering his head for a brief moment before emerging with goggles, a wetsuit, an air mask, and a black tank with orange spirals scattered throughout. He then swiftly summoned twice more to drop his other outfit at home and change, and he was now prepared to go. "You will only need the goggles, air tank, and mask for a little bit today, as Carl will draw a seal on you that will convert your chakra into oxygen and give you clear vision underwater. After that seal is applied you will be able to take both of those off. Before we dive, make 300 clones and leave them up here to train with other sea creatures who swim by, and myself you personally will be visiting and studying underwater with Carl until you can master what he teaches you," Ness said as he watched Naruto attempt to become snug in his wetsuit. Ness began to dive down after saying, "It'll take some time to get used to it, so until then let's just go down and introduce you to Carl." Naruto soon followed. In addition to a variety of mythical fish and sea monsters swimming about their day, Naruto was astounded by what he saw in front of him. In the distance, he could make out the faint outline of a large, shadowed whale or 2. With Ness floating beneath him, a voice behind him remarked, "Breathtaking, isn't it?" Naruto rolled his eyes at what he was doing. He turned to greet what he assumed was Carl, but he saw nothing. Ness began to return to the surface, saying, "Well, as you 2 get acquainted, I'll go ahead and train the clones." The voice behind Naruto whimpered, "Oh, but you're going to miss his reaction. If you want me to stay for his reaction, reveal yourself so you 2 can start your introductions," Ness countered, floating above Naruto. "Only after he takes his mask and goggles off. I already wrote the seal on him." This time, the voice spoke from below him, but when he looked down, nothing was there. "Naruto, go ahead and take off your goggles, mask, and air tank," Ness said. Despite his doubts, he trusted Ness and followed instructions. He discovered that removing the mask allowed him to breathe as easily as if he had been on land, and that removing the goggles improved his vision. Carl said, "Now kid, look behind you," as he turned off his camouflage. Naruto turned around once more and gaped in amazement at how well this thing blended in. An enormous octopus that appeared to be able to easily split boats in half floated behind him. Carl started to shrink to the size of a typical octopus just as he was about to speak. Size-altering seals, they allow bigger animals to shrink down to more well-fit sizes, but we can't grow past our natural size. Not that we need to, of course. The 2 of the water contract that have it is myself and Joe, I believe he goes by now." Carl responded to his unasked question. As they descended, Naruto asked, "When did you write the seal on me?" Carl replied, "I actually engraved it into your lungs by releasing trace amounts of ink into the water and sending it to your mask. I controlled it to go into your lungs after I had enough. I just simply engraved it as you were looking for me, and because of that your mind didn't register any pain as its one focus was to find me." Carl said, "We will do your training in here because you have to use paper as you can't produce ink like me." He led him to a desk with a large vat of ink on one side, numerous blank scrolls on the other, and a variety of pens to dip into the ink on the desk. Light appeared to be streaming into the room from what appeared to be a seal of some kind. "So, would you mind making a couple of seals for me now and take a look at my own seal?" asked Naruto. At that moment, Naruto raised his shirt and used chakra to reveal the seal. His eyes glassed over for a few minutes after he reached up and touched the seal. Carl's eyes returned to normal, and he said, "Well then, I got good news and bad news. The good news is that if you die the Kya biddies too, so at least for self-preservation purposes he will lend you chakra in life-threatening scenarios," Carl continued. "The bad news is twofold. One, your chakra will be unbalanced and harder to control until the Kya by gets the other half of his chakra back, more than likely sealed in the 4th Hokage's resting place if the story the council said was true. The second is that with the way the seal is set up is to slowly filter the chakra into yours and get you used to it, thus making your chakra even harder to control." Carl stated that he was about to offer his solution to the second part before his eyes glazed over. The Kyokbai exploded out as soon as Naruto was in front of him, saying, "Okay, listen up brat, I would really like to leave, but if what that squid said is true, we're stuck with each other. So, I offer you a deal to make this a semi-workable relationship. I require several things to make this work. 1. Change this Kami-forsaken scenery. 2. Get the squid to fix the filter because the way it's draining my chakra is like a mosquito sucking chakra out of something as large as that boss summon you have. 3. Get the squid to set up a sensory linking seal or loosen the full seal a little so I can at least see the outside and smell and taste again. 4. When I get my other half of chakra I will start training you at night while your body rests. It spoke prior to allowing the container to speak the first time it arrived. After concluding that it was speaking the truth, Naruto said, okay, 1. How do I change the scenery? 2. That filter is prepping my body to handle your chakra. 3. That sounds reasonable, but I can see some drawbacks to that. 4. Wouldn't that just leave me mentally tired? It's your mind, you have control over the scenery. 2. That seal is doing jack to help you build a resistance. 3. What drawbacks? And 4. No, because after I get my second half and the filter removed, your chakra won't be in flux 24/7, meaning it will finally be calm during the night, and doing the training will make it seem to your brain that nothing has changed, causing you to wake up as refreshed or better as you have been for years. The surrounding area rippled, then another, until a wave of chakra swept by, briefly blinding the tailed beast. It was astounded by the change in scenery when it opened its eyes once more. He could hear some enormous game for him to hunt, like rabbits and deer, as well as the sound of other foxes in the distance. What had once been a sewer was now a very lush forest with trees tall enough to be larger than him at full size. He could smell that his host's chakra had changed from water on the sewer floor to a sizable lake with a waterfall that was continuously adding to it, making it deeper and bigger. He could feel the artificial sunlight striking his fur through the canopy of the trees. The Kyokbai stretched his legs for the first time in a long time and remarked, "This is the best mindscape I've been in, and I had 2 containers before you." Naruto said, "Well, I will let you have fun in here and relay your message to Carl," as he gradually disappeared from view. He thought, this is definitely the one father talked about, and then, for the first time in a long time, he saw a rabbit and pursued it, truly relishing the excitement of the chase. Carl inquired, "So how did it go?" As Naruto's blast overview began to fade. "The Kyokbai wants to know if you could remove the filter and loosen the seal a little to give him sensory access to smell and taste and whatnot." "That is certainly doable," Carl replied. "I will do that before you go home after today to let your body adapt overnight, because while loosening the seal isn't an issue and removing the filter isn't either, it does have the potential to have some adverse effects on your body, such as your chakra pathways may expand again, which will give you a larger chakra reserve." And then they headed to the desk to begin the process. Before heading to the mission's office, the team started light warm-ups at their training grounds to start the day. They saw the Hokage distributing missions at the mission office. The Hokage responded to the question he knew would be asked by the genin, saying, "I will sometimes manage to get some free time and come down to give missions, but today is a special day. As the other 2 teams that passed are going to take their first missions today, I decided to hand out the missions and get to see the reaction to the missions they get." Naruto inquired, "Well, in that case, how many missions do you have?" The Hokage responded, "Well, we have around 100 D rank missions you could take." He then enumerated all 100. To bring their total number of jobs to 10, Naruto said, "We will take the pool hall tiling job, the clean the river job, the dispose of a rampaging boar job, the sewage investigation job, the till a farmer's field job, and clear out some mice from a barn." "Oh, Naruto, I have been meaning to give this to you," he said, pulling a map from his robe. "Well, that's a tall order, but I don't see anything wrong with it as long as you complete them all today," the elderly Kage remarked, thinking, he'll probably spam clones to speed things up. He was absolutely correct. He concluded by giving what appeared to be a blank piece of paper a euro, a map to his mother's cottage a euro, to everyone else. "I was told by your mother that only those with Uzumaki blood can see what is contained on this map," he said. As soon as he saw the clone appear and the team departing the mission's office, Naruto said, "Oh, old man, would you mind if I leave a clone behind to talk to you as we go do these missions?" "Not a problem, my boy." When the team returned to the training grounds, Shikamaru asked, "So, what are we practicing today, sensei?" "We will be practicing chakra control so you all waste less chakra on jutsu and can last longer in a fight," he said. After that, they all went tree climbing, with Asuma spinning 25 leaves around his body as he climbed and descended the tree, Naruto performing the tree walking with the 2 gates open, and Shikamaru and Shino performing the fundamental tree walking. Around lunchtime, They stopped to consider their progress. Shino had outperformed Shikamaru in the control area, but he was unable to add more leaves due to his bugs consuming so much chakra. Shikamaru could now spin 2 leaves and walk up and down the tree multiple times. Asuma could now spin 30 leaves while walking up the tree. And Naruto could now walk up and down the tree with 1 leaf on his head spinning quickly with 2 gates open, including the ability to hold both gates open for an additional minute before experiencing the effects. Listen up, brat, when you start to learn my chakra and can call among it at will, it would be best to practice these exercises with my chakra so you can get your body used to it and control it better. After they had finished, Naruto reflected, yeah, that sounds like a logical thing. A mental connection was made once the seal was broken, allowing them to communicate without constantly dragging Naruto into the mindscape. Asuma pulled out a shogi board and had Shikamaru set it up. All right, Naruto, your clones should be about done with those 6 missions. Why don't you meditate for a while and see if any clones' memories come back? Asuma said. Before we do that, I want to summon someone first so the stuff he'll do can be done now, said Naruto. Then he called Carl. Carl, who looked like a typical octopus, said, so, these are the ones you want me to draw the seals on. He nodded, and as Naruto began to meditate, Shino sent his bugs to feed on him for a while Carl described the situation. Carl described placing a tentacle on each of their stomachs and closing his eyes to focus. He wanted to know if a chakra storage seal was possible. When I told yes, he wanted to know if I could put it on his 2 teammates and sensei so they could increase the amount of chakra stored so as to not be caught unaware at the heat of battle. All right, I engraved the seal onto your chakra core. This has more benefits than a normal chakra seal, as once your reserves near full the seal starts sapping off a little at a time to slowly fill up, but the best part is that you can activate it when you and the seal are full to stretch your coils to be bigger, allowing for more chakra to be stored in your body. Though I would avoid doing that unless you have a capable doctor nearby because it will be painful, Carl said as he returned home. Everyone was going about their own business for a few hours before Naruto got up from his meditation. He stretched, being careful not to squash any bugs, and said, the missions have been finished, and they actually grabbed 5 more, bringing us to the halfway mark. With his bugs actually full and only consuming the amount his body was producing, Shino withdrew his colony and observed as the chakra he had accumulated over those hours remained in his system. Naruto pulled out the map and turned to go, saying, and since it is almost sunset, I am going to go find my mom's cabin if you don't mind. Everyone said, see you guys in 2 days, and parted ways. Naruto noticed a blood seal on the gate leading to the cabin's grounds as he got closer. He got inside and reapplied the seal after it had been broken, causing the gate to swing open and close. Ankle-high grass, an empty garden bed next to the cottage, flowers sprouting here and there, and what appeared to be a waterfall cascading down to a stream with trees encircling the riverbed made the grounds look lovely and well kept. The cottage was one of the coziest places he had ever seen, with an open living room as soon as you entered that led back to a kitchen that included a stove, refrigerator, sink, dishwasher, and pantry. A bedroom with a balcony overlooking the living room was accessible via a staircase. A full-sized bed, a bookcase, and a door leading to a complete bathroom were all in the bedroom. 8 days had passed since he discovered the cabin, and the team was gelling well. Shino was increasing his chakra reserve, which made his beetles faster because they had more chakra to spare. Now, Shikamaru could defeat Asuma in half of his matches. When Asuma was an Anbu captain, he was able to compete with Kakashi. Though he was not yet proficient enough to begin learning from Kira, Naruto made the most progress because he had trained under the water contract and was proficient in seals. He had studied under everyone except Joe, who he was informed wanted to train him with the Norse branch of the contract. He had also learned some water jutsu, and after passing Carl's final test, he would be prepared to move under the Japanese branch of the contract. Shino in particular, whose body is accustomed to handling small amounts of chakra due to the beetles, became proficient in chakra control and was able to perform the water walking exercise instinctively. Naruto created 5 teams of clones during the team training days, and they now had enough missions to complete AC rank, which they all went to do. Can you believe it? Naruto asked, jumping up and down with excitement. This is our first C rank, guys, can you believe it? Shikamaru, who was also grinning, remarked, troublesome. Calm down, you irate blonde, we are all excited for this. They would be the first team in their class to receive AC rank. Shikamaru is right, Naruto, if we don't stay calm and collected we may not get a mid-ranked C rank and have to do a low-ranking C, Shino remarked in a monotonous yet slightly enthusiastic tone. Asuma was lagging behind, delighted at how well his students got along. They saw Team 7, minus Choji, attempting to convince the Hokage to give them a C rank when they arrived at the mission's office. The Hokage complained that paperwork would be preferable to handling this situation and said, "For the last time no, you have to complete the required 30D rank missions before you can be qualified to take a C rank." The Uchiha spat venomously and said, "But after 5 of those chores you idiots call missions, it's not helping me reach my fullest potential so that way I can kill that monster." Team 10 recoiled at the way he phrased the statement. After a minute of self-control, the Hokage said, "If you manage to find a team willing to let you guys tag along after your team completes 15D ranks I will let you go on a C rank." The Uchiha, furious at not getting his way, responded, "Fine then, just give us another stupid D rank." The genin of Team 7 was unaware that the Ketchtora mission was being thrown at Kakashi, but the Hokage said, "Here you go. Now Team 10, what can I get for you?" The elderly Kage inquired, singing for the Anbu to snap a photo of Team 7's face shortly and grinning to himself about how priceless this would be. Additionally, this caused Team 7's genin to become aware that another team was present. With dramatic flair, Naruto said, "Why Gramps, surely you must have seen that we completed the required 30D ranks, and we are ready to take our first C rank." His team laughed at the reactions of Team 7. Choji was a little irritated that he would now have to put up with those two arguing and fighting even more, and that his teacher had been so indolent that they had only completed 5 missions while another team had completed 30. Although Kakashi was surprised that they completed so many missions in such a short period of time, he attributed it to shadow clones. In their eyes, a third-tier team was already on a C rank ahead of them, which infuriated Sasuke and Sakura. The Hokage was pleased with 2 of the 4 responses and remarked, "Why of course I got the perfect one for you guys right here." Asuma added insult to injury by saying, "Whoa, are you sure about this, Pop? This looks like a high C rank mission." The Hokage took the time to enjoy the 2 people's pain and rage before replying, "It only wants you track down a wealthy merchant's shipment that got stolen and return it." "Well team, the area the shipment was taken isn't too far and the merchant lives here in Konoha, so pack for a 3-day mission to be on the safe side and meet by the front gate in 30 minutes. Asuma said as she left the tower. The team arrived at the gate 30 minutes later. "All right, the village is 3 hours away, we'll go there and meet up with the townsfolk to get more information," Asuma said while making her point. Shikamaru struck up a conversation while the other 3 trailed behind. "So, my old man has let me sign the deer contract while I was packing. My father did the same thing with the beetle contract, saying I would be the first summoner they've had in a while that could summon the bigger combat-orientated ones because of my bigger chakra capacity," Shino said. Naruto said, "Well, after I pass Carl's test, I'll be moving on to the next section of the contract to advance further under Kira." Naruto was pleased that, thanks to the scrolls his mother left behind and Carl, he had improved his seal skills to the point where he was almost at master rank. Asuma asked, "What is Kira actually?" and mentally noted that he should sign the monkey contract as soon as he got home because it was past due. "No clue," Naruto replied truthfully. "They won't let me see her until I complete Carl's trial, and I can't identify what it is because any and all descriptions of her are vague. All I know is that it's a female monster with Japanese roots, has superb control over lightning, and is able to do things with seals no one else knows how to do." Naruto replied, "So, Naruto, what is it your clone and the Hokage talked about a week ago?" Shikamaru inquired. "Well, I needed something with high access clearance, and he's been working out a way to get it for me." Naruto replied vaguely, "Does this have something to do with the demonic chakra my bugs have been sensing while I build my reserves?" Shino asked quietly. He tensed up a little at the mention of demonic chakra, but then relaxed when he realized it was there, he just didn't know what it was. After giving it some thought, he gave in and sighed. "So in this world I am very special, and it's not because of my summons," Naruto said. He finished with venom, saying, "There are actually 8 other people like me, and we are known as Jinchuriki." Shikamaru questioned, "The power of human sacrifice? More like scapegoats." Naruto muttered to himself, "You guys know of the 9-tailed beasts, right?" Shino and Shikamaru simultaneously realized, the 4th didn't kill the Kyotbai. He sealed it into you. Naruto's part right comment made Asuma pay even more intense attention to the discussion because she knew it would either make or break the team. You see, he sealed half of it into me and the other half into his corpse. So, I'm looking for it and asked Gramps to speed up the process because with only half it messes up my chakra control and does more harm than good. Said Naruto. So, you were going to have Carl or Kira transfer the other half back into the Kya by destabilize it and your chakra, said Shino. And this has an adverse effect of making it easier to tap into his chakra as it is now. I would be overcome with rage because of the unstable mixture, and so when the two halves are reunited I can keep a calm and cool head while tapping into any benefits that his chakra gives me, though I will only be using it as a last resort kind of thing. Said Naruto. Since Asuma and Naruto handled the news so well, knowing that the team is even closer and will function better as a unit, the rest of the trip was spent in silence as Shino and Shikamaru realized how beneficial it could be to have a Jincha Riki on the team in a life or death situation. After a few hours, you could see the four conversing with the mayor of the town that is reportedly closest to the camp. The mayor, seated behind his opulent desk made of a rare wood made in Suna, explained how much they were making off of this arrangement by saying, well, the bandits first came 6 months ago, and we decided to propose a deal that we would shelter them in a clearing nearby and not call ninjas to be rid of them. In exchange they leave our village alone. In an attempt to learn more from this source, Asuma inquired, any information you can give us on numbers and who their leader is? Unknowingly caught in a lie by all the ninjas, the mayor stated, their leader is an A-rank missing ninja from Konoha, and he has 2 C-rank underlings from Hidden Grass that help keep the rest of the 42 non-ninja men in line. Asuma left the office after saying, well, thanks for the time. His 3 bewildered students followed him shortly after. Asuma turned around and answered his students' unanswered questions after they had been walking for a while and were no longer visible from the village. But sensei, why don't we attack now before they expect us? Shikamaru questioned, still lacking the vision necessary to completely comprehend Asuma's point of view. The mayor is benefiting from this deal he has made and as such will be sure to contact the bandits so they can prepare for us. Before continuing, Asuma stated, well, we've entered a waiting game and the one with the most intel at the end will win. They don't know who they are up against, and it will be hard for them to investigate and defend camp at the same time, and so the plan is to have Naruto and Shino scout out the camp with their clones and bugs respectively. Meanwhile I want Shikamaru to summon a medic deer and find some poisonous plants to slip into their food supplies. If Naruto could summon some vampires to pick off some of the grunts. Summoning jutsu, both Naruto and Shikamaru said simultaneously. As the smoke cleared, a magnificent buck with a white coat, 5 feet tall, and a rack of antlers that stood an additional foot above its head and appeared capable of amputating an arm or leg without any resistance, spoke in a deep, rough voice, ah, it's been a while since a Nara actually used the contract. Greetings young Nara, my name is Jekyll, I am the head medic deer and am the left-hand buck for the leader. My brother Hyde is the head of the combat deer and is the right hand of the leader. Jekyll said, seeming relieved to be able to stretch his limbs once more on the land of the elemental nation. While Jekyll was recounting the history of the deer clan, Shikamaru said, my name's Shikamaru, and I request your aid in finding poisonous plants to slip into an enemy's food and water supply. Dracula waved his arm around to the 3 other vampires who had arrived and asked, so, if they are poisoning the food supply, what are we doing here? There was something unique about these 3, even though they weren't your normal group of vampires. Before introducing the other 3 vampires, Dracula said, when your call went out for vampires, the rest were out sparring with the zombies, we were the only 4 left that weren't preoccupied. Okay, so starting on the left we have Yaraho, Morel, and Shiji. Dracula said. 3 feet tall, Yaraho had a huge head, red skin, and a mouth that hung open just enough to reveal his sharp underbite. The ends of his fingers and toes resembled tiny suction cups. Morel, on the other hand, appeared to have lost the lower half of her body and instead remained motionless in midair by flapping her 3-foot-long, bat-like wings. Despite wearing red long traditional Chinese robes with golden spirals and swirls, as well as a golden cap with similar designs, Shiji appeared more like a zombie than a vampire. You will be picking off some people to make the bandit camp we are raiding on edge after Shino's bugs and my clones are done scouting out their numbers and strengths. Naruto stated following his observations. Ah, perfect, then this makes a conversation I had wanted to talk to you earlier about easier. Dracula replied with a smile on his face. You know how we hunt the other summons for extra food, well if you wouldn't mind us taking back all the dead we wouldn't have to hunt any summons for food as we could just have the bandits and occasional ninja you fight. Dracula continued, This of course has many benefits as most of the contract have been actually weaker than we should be as our primary diet used to consist of humans until the other summons came about. Well Naruto, if you could convince Dad there are plenty of bandit camp missions that get pushed to the side you could take and just have all your summons get a nice stockpile of excess food. Asuma said silently, sending a thanks to Kami for allowing the summons to exist so they weren't hunted. Naruto answered, as long as we spare innocents I shouldn't see the problem with it, not really wanting to visualize his closest friends devouring him. Now do you want them to get their first kill this mission, Asuma? Dracula inquired, wondering if the instructor desired for his pupils to get their hands dirty at such a young age. It would be nice, just so that way when they are in a life or death moment they won't hesitate, and I could start counseling them through any grievances they might get. Asuma sighed. After about half an hour, Shikamaru returned to the clearing while Jekyll had a bunch of human toxic berries in his mouth. As he crushed the berries and produced a tiny vial to hold the liquid, Jekyll remarked, these berries when ground up into a liquid are tasteless and odorless and can kill around 2 hours of a human ingesting it. As Morel reached out and took the vial, Dracula remarked, perfect, Morel can slip that into their water container and food supplies while we do our part. After Shikamaru thanked him, Jekyll returned to the summon realm. Dracula said, okay, we will be back and unspotted with the 3 required, as he transformed into a bat and took off, Morel following closely behind. Yaraho leapt and quickly sang through the trees using the suction cups on the tips of his fingers. However, Shiji caught them all off guard by stretching and leaping 30 feet into the air, out of the 4 ninjas' line of sight. Asuma was the first person to emerge from his shock and said, well, okay then. Well, we'll take this time to rest up as it's almost dark and we will strike before first light after the poison takes effect as well as keep them on edge for the night making them tired. Asuma responded. The ninjas were getting ready to raid the camp as the night was rapidly coming to an end. Shino relayed the information he received from the bugs that were still in the camp, saying, well, that poison was sure effective. All that's left are the 3 ninja and my bugs say they haven't slept a wink since the 4 vampires stole some of the bandits. Asuma wanted each of his students to battle someone who was near their own chakra reserves, so he asked, what are their chakra levels comparatively? Well, rank-wise I would place 2 of them at high genin reserves and another at high chunin reserves. Replied Shino. Right, so the plan is that Shino and Shikamaru go and fight the 2 with genin level reserves and Naruto you'll take on the chunin level reserves guy. I'll remain in the shadows and only help if you are in real danger. This is to help you get your first kill, so I will be here to counsel you if you need it, said Asuma. As the bodies begin to decompose, the 4 quickly find themselves at the edge of the camp, the stench of death filling their nostrils. 3 different figures were huddled in a tent after the 3 genin entered the camp to lure the enemy away while Asuma clung to the wall's shadow. The 3 could hear the conversation taking place inside the tent as they got closer. After hearing that, the 3 leapt back and threw 3 kunai at the tent, but only Shikamaru's hit its target. What do we do, boss? All of our men are gone, and we don't know a damn useful thing about the enemy. Don't you think I know that? I am just wondering how they were able to see through those lies the mayor gave. Especially since he said they were a genin team. The person Shikamaru struck let out a pained, "Ow son of a bitch, they're here," cry. At that moment, all 3 of them burst out of the tent, one of them carrying a kunai. Did your sensei lead you here to die, or is he that overconfident in your abilities to let you attack us without him around? The leader chided. As he went to find the missing nin he launched, Naruto pretended to become enraged at the statement and punched the man in the face, sending him to the wall across from the camp. Don't you ever talk bad about sensei, he yelled. He saw the ninja land on a small lake close to the camp. As he got closer, he bit his thumb and performed the summoning jutsu hand signs while grinning to himself like a crazy person. Oh, seems like someone is not on good terms with their summons. What did you do, call them lame and useless? The ninja asked, laughing as the smoke cleared to show nothing had arrived. Naruto said, man, you really are an idiot. As he began to walk toward Naruto to discipline him, the nin asked, what did you call me, you little brat? That was before Naruto pointed down, and he noticed a big shadow beneath him when he followed his direction. The man quickly discovered that his limbs were bound by 4 tentacles after realizing it was too late to flee. When the man looked up quickly, he saw that Naruto had slipped into a taijutsu stance and whispered something that made the bandit turn pale. Open gate of opening, and open gate of healing, he said as a greenish tint grew around his body. He ran away before the man could see him, and 3 seconds after Naruto's punch had punctured his ribs, he had already died. After promising to speak with Asuma later, he came back to find his 2 teammates staring down at 2 lifeless bodies at their feet. One appeared to be a dehydrated zombie, while the other had a broken neck. Asuma jumped out of the shadows to console his young genin upon witnessing the return of his final pupil. He said to his pupils, "The first kill is always the hardest." Asuma lit a cigarette and recalled his first kill, saying, "And in all honesty it really doesn't get easier. You will notice that we each have our own way of coping with the stress our jobs put on us mentally. I have smoking, Guy throws himself into training, Kakashi reads his smut all over town and shows up 3 hours late to everything because he spends that time at the memorial stone paying respect to his comrades that have fallen over the years. We each have our own way of coping, and that's why I wanted you to get this first kill early. So, you have time to find a coping mechanism." Asuma sighed. "Now come on, let's go back home." After making sure everything was there, the merchant said, "Thank you so much for retrieving this shipment back, it really means a lot to me." Asuma said, "Not a problem, sir, we were just glad to be of help," as his pupils continued to reflect on their first kill. "Alright team, you did wonderful on this mission, and I think you deserve a break, so for the next week take the time to relax and maybe pick a hobby you would find enjoyable enough to help you cope with how this experience has made you feel." Asuma continued, "And if you need to talk to me, I'll be at our training grounds from 8 in the morning to noon." He stated prior to his disappearance. As he took off for the Hokage Tower, Naruto remarked, "Well, a week is perfect to get my body acclimated to the full power of Fuzzy. So, I'll see you guys then, okay? Hey, Gramps, are you ready?" Naruto asked as he entered and saw an elderly man with white hair wearing an oil kanji. "Who's that old fart?" he asked, displaying neither remembrance nor regard for him. The man identified himself as Jiraiya by saying, "Watch it, brat, I am the mighty Toad Sage, the great Jiraiya." To enhance the effect, he also made a number of strange poses and called forth a small toad wearing battle armor. From behind his desk, Hiruzen regretted not alerting Naruto about his most devoted pupil. "He's also our resident seal master and here to double-check everything goes smoothly. He'll also be here to give you a test on your seal proficiency so you could start selling seals to the village for profit." Jiraiya said, "So, I hear your summoning clan has 2 seal masters, would you mind summoning them both, so we have 3 seal masters on hand to help you just in case." "I'll summon Carl first," Naruto replied. "Good morning, young Naruto, how are you doing?" Carl asked, referring to the size of Jiraiya's battle toad. With hesitation, Naruto said, "Hey, do you think I'm good to summon Lady Kira?" "You are more than qualified to summon her, as this will constitute as my test for my seal training to come to an end. After we are done there will be changes to your seal, and the way to pass is to identify those changes and what they do," Carl said with pride about his pupil. As the smoke cleared and a white Appalachian horse with electric blue stripes down its torso and an electric blue mane appeared, a feminine voice exclaimed, "Ah, it feels great to walk in the elemental nations again." The most shocking feature of all was the single horn-like protrusion that protruded from her head. As she stretched out and relished being back in the elemental nations, Kira said, "Greetings, young Naruto, it is great to see you in person. I am Kira, also known as a Kirin. I have 4 other forms, each closely related to an element. This form is closer to the lightning element. Alright, Gramps, when can we start? We got a week of downtime I would like to use to recover from any effects this would have on my chakra control." The procedure was easy and painless. There was virtually no chance of error because there were 3 seal masters present to double-check everything. Carl and Kira came home with some intriguing news to share while he was still in his medically induced coma to ease the strain on his body and mind. From the balcony railing, Carl said, "I know it is unlike us to call a full meeting of the council, but matters have changed." Kira trotted into the hall and remarked, "I'm just glad the seal to call you all worked from the elemental nations." With a hint of panic, Dracula asked, "So, what is this all about? Did something happen with the sealing?" As he, along with everyone else, began to like Naruto. Carl said, "It does, the sealing was a success, but something weird happened at the end," but he was at a loss for words. As the news set in, Kira said in a terrified tone, "He set it off unconsciously and now our timetables have moved drastically forward." Everyone hurried past the boss room and down the stairs as soon as the information was processed. While everyone else was too preoccupied to get down to the return room, Kira was the only one who noticed the fewer bookshelves than in the previous report and the boss's lighter breathing. Naruto became aware that he was in his mindscape as soon as he opened his eyes. He closed his eyes and lay there peacefully for a moment. When he heard the Kyotbai approaching, he opened his eyes to find that his size had doubled. He said, "Once we are done talking here I will wake you out of the medically induced coma you are under." It made sense because he had previously only been at half power, but witnessing this put the size of the Kyotbai into perspective. Naruto nodded as he settled in for what he thought would be a lengthy talk, and the fox had the same idea. Naruto inquired, "So, what is it that you wanted to talk about, Kyotbai?" "I have 3 things to talk to you about. First is my name is not Kyotbai, it's Kurama. The Kyotbai was a title given to me by humans. Second, is that I wanted to demonstrate what you would be able to do when you get to 4 tails or more of chakra. Third, is that I am willing to work with you if you almost entirely break the seal. The only thing the Shinigami made damn sure wouldn't break was the soul tethering link, which means I am now stuck with you for your entire life including your afterlife," Kurama stated in order to avoid being interrupted by the blonde shinobi. "Well then I guess if we are stuck together forever it would be better to just work with each other right off the bat, no tug of war required." "What is this technique that I could use?" Naruto said in a loud voice. He chose to go ahead with the demonstration and teach Naruto about history, disregarding the blonde's thoughts. "The skill is called Tailed Beast Bomb and it is the one you saw your old man teleport away when I attacked the village. You see, when the sage created us he gave us each a common and unique power. The common one is, as you guessed, the Tailed Beast Bomb, which every tailed beast knows. Shukaku gained control over sand, Matabi gained blue hell fire. Isobu gained control over water and coral, Son Goku gained the sub-element of lava and its elements needed to make it, Kakua gained the sub-element of steam and its respective elements, Saiken actually got a slime-based ability that could be used for both healing and attack, Chame gained a connection to bugs and access to scale-based jutsu, Gaia Ki gained an ability to produce fine-quality sealing ink and a high amount of physical strength to boot." He said as he watched his host take in the details, "Now I got a strong connection to nature, hence why I can use all of the basic elements and have access to nature chakra and negative emotion sensing, which I never used either before as it wasn't needed." "Oh, so that's why you have all those natural disasters tied to you," Naruto replied with clarity. Naruto questioned, perplexed as to how that could be, "But wait, if you have access to the basic elements how come I don't?" Kurama answered, "You will over time, as your body gets used to more and more of my chakra, but when I got broken in half, my half that had access to nature manipulation was sealed in your dad." Naruto went over everything he had been told and asked, "So why can I only do the Tailed Beast Bomb after 4 tails?" "Simply because of how heavy the thing is. While the lower tails can do it, they have a slightly weaker version. Mine is the strongest as I have the most tails and thus can hold more weight," Kurama replied with sincerity. Naruto questioned the beast inquisitively, "Well, that's about all my questions right now unless you have anything else to add." Kurama pushed him out of the mindscape with the shockwave of the detonated Tailed Beast Bomb, saying, "Remember my training while you sleep. It will consist of getting you used to the negative side effects of using my chakra. Now wake up." One of your summons appeared and he reeks of nervousness. When he woke up, he saw Dracula pacing the hospital room where he had been assigned with anxiety. As he stretched and gathered his clothes to change out of his hospital gown, Naruto said, "Hey Dracula, why are you nervous?" "Ah, good, you're awake. We have something we need you to do in the summoning realm, so your training is going to have to be postponed so you can deal with this." Dracula continued to pace the room. "What's going on?" Naruto inquired doubtfully, beginning to feel anxious himself. He began and raised his hand to indicate that he could continue, saying, "Your body sent out a chakra ping to all the monsters in the contract when the seal transferring was happening. All the monsters, including the ones that chose to wander the world instead of stay in our territory. They are demanding to meet you and they plan on trying to make the boss wake up by feeding him your chakra." "Why would that wake the boss up?" Naruto asked after a moment's reflection. "Remember the excess chakra you kept putting into the jutsu well, apparently that has been going to the boss of the contract and has sped up his healing process," replied Dracula. Naruto said, "I'm still not seeing how this is a bad thing. Normally it wouldn't, but they are pissed because they gave us clear instructions to only set off a ping when the boss was awake, and we had a summoner," replied Dracula. "I see now, and since you only have one they are throwing a hissy fit, is that it?" "Well, yes and no," replied Dracula. "Only 2 came through before we got the message out that he was still asleep. But the 2 that came through are terrifyingly powerful even to our standards." "Have I read their myths?" Naruto inquired. "Oh, You most definitely have the first through the portal was Baba Yaga, and the second was Sushigumo. Naruto replied, I know who Baba Yaga is, but I haven't read about this Sushigumo person. He searched his mind for the answer but couldn't find it. When Naruto finished getting dressed and making sure he had everything, Dracula rushed in and teleported them back to the summoning realm with a poof, leaving only a note in its place. Baba Yaga was our third seal expert but left to wait for the boss. Sushigumo was part of the Japanese part of the contract but left when we started eating other summons instead of humans. As for what he is, he most commonly takes the form of a giant spider and is a master of illusions. As Sato attempted to divert their guest's attention, a rough male voice echoed from the council chambers, asking, what in the hell is taking him this long? As they attempted to calm the shapeshifter, she said, please calm down, Shigo. We haven't seen you in forever. How have you been? In an attempt to elicit some pity from the two creatures, she went on, he just got out of a transplanting of sorts, so it may be a while. A wrinkled older woman asked, what sort of transplant? He's the Kyotbai's container but only had half of it sealed in him, so we were transferring the other half back in when the ping went out by accident. Hiro was speaking in the corner. Oh, so you have taken up the art of sealing as well. I thought it would be me and Carl forever as this clan's seal masters. The woman replied. The lightning began to flicker around Kira's body. That's right, I picked it up right before you left and helped ease the boss's healing process by sealing his memories into books. I was also the one who figured out how to make a seal with elemental chakra without a paper medium. Hiro was beaming with pride. And with your ability to change forms that gives you an edge. Nice going, Kira, you are by all means better than Carl last time I was here, but not as good as me yet. The frightened elf replied. The doors opened to reveal Naruto and Dracula before Kira could respond. Naruto spotted two additional creatures as they entered, and he surmised that they were the two who emerged. Baba Yaga wore a pair of vintage witch's robes dyed blue and yellow, and she had the appearance of an elderly woman with wrinkled skin, a pointed nose, and thin gray hair that fell to her shoulders. The other creature in the room was a massive, 8-foot-tall spider with completely black skin. With a hint of pride, Dracula announced that Baba Yaga had given Naruto a favorable glance. This is our young summoner, his name is Naruto. It was true that Baba Yaga could see the young boy standing in front of her bringing the other creatures bound by the contract together and foretelling great things. On the other hand, Shigo was incensed that the contract holder was just a boy. Shigo rubbed his spider form's front two legs together and remarked, I'm half tempted to eat you where you stand, but I got a better idea. He finally broke as he waited for something to happen and watched with anticipation as everyone else looked at him. To the surprise of the two newcomers, he asked, why are you guys all staring at me? Shigo stammered, how did you break the genjutsu I placed on you so easily? Naruto asked, attempting to detect any traces of foreign chakra in his body but failing to detect any, you placed a genjutsu on me. I see it now, Baba Yaga said, drawing everyone's attention. You said he was a Biju container, right, Kira? She asked, receiving a nod of agreement before continuing. Everyone stopped and considered the statement. When you put in the chakra to trap him in the illusion, the beast's chakra must have come in and disrupt his chakra flow in that area. The gypsy is right. Now you are immune to most every genjutsu out there but those of a bloodline techniques. Kurama briefly spoke. He conveyed that information to the summons, who gave him a contemplative expression. Naruto asked in a hopeful tone, so, since you guys came back, are you going to stay? Baba Yaga said, I'll be staying, first. Baba Yaga concluded without mentioning what she had observed in him earlier. Simply put, I can see the boss summon getting healthier, and if what Kira said was true and you're learning seals, I would be the next step after Kira. Shigo confused Naruto by saying, as long as I can eat humans again, I'll come back, though I am surprised to see Sato as the clan section leader. Just like how the nature spirit section left when the boss wouldn't wake up, so did a number of others including the last boss, and so I got shoved into this role unwittingly. The huge skeleton replied. Baba Yaga said, oh, that's right, I used to hang out and technically be under the nature spirit portion of the clan. Koninger replied, speaking for the first time since the meeting, well, since they left I have been the one with the most connection to nature, so you can join our section temporarily if you would like. Carl appeared extremely exhausted as he ascended the stairs. Just wake up the boss, I can't keep responding to everyone asking what's going on. The octopus pleaded. Dracula led Naruto down to the boss while everyone else went about their own business. Naruto, This is why your training was postponed. You are going to spend this entire week feeding your chakra to the boss. The hope is to have him up before the week's end, but he still has a long way to go before he's fully recovered. A week passed quickly, but a lot was accomplished, and everyone was thrilled because the boss was nearing the end of his bookcase. Asuma stood behind his students in the mission room and said, Team 10 reporting for duty. Before a messenger bird interrupted, the Hokage said, Good morning, I hope you had an enjoyable week off. Now on to a mission for you guys. He had their mission after reading the message. It seems that yesterday Kakashi took his team on a C rank by completing the rest of the missions that his team required by himself. It appears as though he was hoping to have them wake up to the real world by taking them off on a higher ranked mission. Hiruzen stopped to read the remainder of the document. Hiruzen closes the scroll and looks up at the faces of Team 10, saying, It appears that the client lied about the true rank of the mission and so Kakashi is requesting backup. You are to be that backup. Hurry, as Kakashi said they will wait one day at the border of the two countries before he continues on with the mission. Well team, do you have all the gear you need? Asked Asuma. Yup, I have most everything sealed into my belt here. I even have provisions to last us a month. Naruto replied, I am ready as well sensei. I figured we would be going on to a long mission after that short C rank last time, said Shikamaru. Shino realized that everyone was waiting for him as they turned to face him. All he said was, I am ready sensei. Asuma led his group out of the office and farther into the village, saying, Well then let's move out, we can make it to the border in a couple of hours traveling at ninja pace. Asuma exclaimed, What were you thinking, Kakashi? After realizing that he and his group had only caught up to him 2 hours after they had left the village. You needlessly put your team in danger, you haven't even made it to the border yet, and worst of all you betrayed your own motto. Asuma went on, still feeling the effects of his rage over the team's situation. Sakura was busy berating Choji for stealing Sasuke's spotlight to get her attention, and Choji appeared a little rough with a few cuts along his arm and was perspiring a little, so his feelings were justified. Sasuke was unconcerned about the entire situation. Since that was the only takeaway he felt the need to defend, Kakashi stated, I did not break my motto in any way. Asuma gestured to Choji, who was becoming paler, and said, Really, in doing all the D ranks your team required to put them in this scenario, and not knowing any techniques to heal him from the obvious case of poison he has and relying on my 2 genin to heal him is in no way abandoning them. You're a jonin, for Kami's sake you could have easily beaten any opponent to do this. Or have you gotten so lazy that you can no longer operate at the level of an ex-Anbu captain that you used to be? Asuma concluded his rant with that inquiry. He would think about the question the rest of the way to Wave and back to Konoha. After Asuma finished eating Kakashi, Shikamaru remarked, Sensei, it looks like we were able to clear the poison out of his system in time, but it took a majority of Jekyll's energy and some of Shino's bugs to make sure it was fully gone. Asuma said, Good, is he able to walk? Highly unlikely, the poison had time to spread and took a lot of his energy out of him. Shikamaru replied, If you would allow me sensei, I have a way to transport him and the client so that we may travel at a ninja's pace instead of a civilian's. Shino said, with a shout of, summoning jutsu, and a green light from Asuma, a brown female praying mantis emerged, extending her legs and appearing relieved. As she tested her wings, she remarked, It feels good to be called upon again. Thank you, Shino. Komatao speaks highly of you. Tanda bowed as she started to introduce herself after noticing the others. Oh, where are my manners? My name is Tanda. I can be used for both transport and battle. Asuma gestured for him to climb onto the praying mantis and said, Well, let's get you to your house. Tazuna was it. They didn't stop until they had traveled for a few more hours, when Naruto killed a stark white rabbit by throwing a kunai into a bush. Everyone tried to figure out what was wrong with the rabbit while ignoring Sakura. Kakashi and the rest of Team 10 heard a blade slicing through the air at this precise moment. Get down, shouted Kakashi as he and his 2 awake genin struck the deck. Asuma was standing there with his trench knives out and wind chakra coursing through them when the blade clattered to the ground, cutting him in half. A man appeared by the lake, and the 2 halves of the blade vanished. Asuma flexed his chakra in preparation for a protracted battle and said, Zabuza Momochi, am I to presume you were hired to kill the client? As he infused his blade with chakra to ensure it reattached itself, Zabuza remarked, Well, this is going to be a tough fight. Zabuza remarked, going against the copycat ninja and a former member of the Guardian 12. He was considering calling Haku out if things got too risky. Kakashi said, glaring at Asuma to take care of the client. Actually, you will be facing off against only me. A thick mist began to seep in from the surroundings after that statement. Hidden mist jutsu, Zabuza uttered as he began to move through the mist, but the bearded Jonin's cries of, wind style, great breakthrough, caused it to vanish. Zabuza was forced to employ a different strategy as a result of the mist being blown away. This strategy involved a relentless assault, with Zabuza swinging his sword in a manner that appeared careless to the untrained eye but was actually a very precise series of slashes. Let's just say that it was difficult enough to doge that Kakashi ended up on the water, where he discovered his error. Water style. Water prison jutsu, hehehehe, one Jonin down, one to go. Exclaimed Zabuza in an attempt to scare the others, with varying degrees of success. Asuma backed up to allow his student to work while he ensured the client's safety with the other genin. Naruto, you have a summon to take this guy down? Asuma asked. As he ran through the hand songs, Naruto remarked, oh yeah, and I have someone who's dying to get some action. Summoning jutsu, he yelled, his hands on the water's surface. Is that really all you could summon? A tiny little octopus. Ahahahahaha. The new Kennen chuckled at Carl's decision to only be the size of a Labrador, even though he was obviously not at full size. Naruto gestured to Zabuza and said, hey Carl, I know what happened a week ago really stressed you out, so I figured you could use a little bit of a stress relief. As Carl sank beneath the water's surface to take advantage of the chance to vent, he said, thank you Naruto, though you know you aren't to blame. Last week it was just an unforeseen circumstance. He realized he had made a mistake when he was unable to see or feel Carl's location. A tentacle as thick as a house then began to swing at him from the left, forcing him to drop the water prison or risk being struck. Another tentacle lifted Kakashi into the air and threw him onto the ground as soon as the prison dropped. Zabuza attempted to follow, but as he was dragged underwater, he discovered a tiny tentacle wrapped around his leg. He completely failed to notice that the water surrounding what seemed to be a small octopus was being displaced at a rapid pace as he searched for what he thought was a larger octopus that had been summoned with the smaller one. All Haku could see from above was his master being drawn beneath the water, a huge shadow emerging, and blood beginning to seep upward. The foe hunter Nin flew at the blonde-haired protagonist, hoping to at least kill him in retaliation, out of blind rage at the idea that the genin summon would end Zabuza's life. He failed to notice that two more tentacles emerged from the water, dragging Naruto and the phony hunter Nin to the dark depths below. Above the waves, there was silence as the members of Team 10 realized it would take some time for their blonde-haired compatriot to return. They sent a messenger deer to tell Naruto where to go and began transporting everyone back to Tezuna's house. Beneath the waves was a completely different scene, with a wounded Zabuza strapped to one of Carl's suction cups, a concerned Haku examining his wounds, and a perplexed Naruto wondering why Carl had done this. Among all the tentacles that created the air bubble they were riding in, Carl's voice echoed, now that we are all here we have some things to discuss. The two ex-mist nin were prompted to search for the person speaking. The two Nukenin gave Naruto a perplexed look when he said, going through Zabuza's mind I was able to glean some information that I believe will help bring the boss back to full health. Naruto became extremely serious. You can hear the desperation in his even tone as he asked, how? As he continued to cut through the current, Carl began, I have a theory and feel free to chime in Fuzzy. But since the boss got injured by the 10 tails I reckon that we need the chakra from all 9 of the Biju to make that last bit of recovery to finish. It won't work, Kurama said, still annoyed by the squids. Fuzzy remarked. The 10 tails was more in tune with nature, meaning the last part of the healing process will take place after you learn to enter Sage mode, which I believe they were going to train you in after you finished training with the Japanese section, or more specifically Kira. Asked the walking calamari what the original plan was. Kurama inquired. Ignoring the other two ninja in the octopus air bubble, Naruto relayed, well, he said it won't work but wanted to know what your plan was anyway. The main theory behind the Bloodline Wars is that the peace-loving 4th Mizukage was under a powerful genjutsu, but that it not only affected him, but the 3 tails held inside him. I was hoping that if my theory proved correct we could help the rebels, of which Zabuza has been helping by sending funds and supplies their way, and borrow some of the Biju chakra and deposit it into the recovery room the boss is in. Carl clarified. From his mindscape, Naruto heard a deep, low growl. That good-for-nothing waste of space thinks he can do this to my own kin. Kurama snarled, causing Naruto to physically wince at the volume. Naruto, we are helping the war effort and you will be getting another tenant. Of all the Biju Isobu was by far the kindest, and I will not let that masked maniac control another of my kin. Summon the horse and the gypsy to fully release all that can be. We are not going to let my brother be held prisoner like this any longer. Kurama yelled as he released his chakra in screams. Carl, we are heading to Kiri. How long till we get there? Replied Naruto. Naruto received the response, about an hour at full speed. In another burst of chakra smoke, summoning jutsu, rendered the other two mute when a unicorn and an elderly woman emerged. Naruto laid down to allow the two females to begin working on his seal. We have an hour to work. My tenant has offered full cooperation if we remove everything but the soul tethering link, as that is reinforced by chakra from the Shinigami itself. We are going to war in less than an hour and I need this seal undone ASAP. Carl's voice addressed the two alert humans in the air bubble, saying, now, I know you are confused, so let me give you some information to clear that right up. When I broke your skin and caused the bleeding to take effect, I was able to have ink slip into your bloodstream and imprint a seal on your brain to allow me access to your memories. Carl began. Before the tree tails were transferred to Naruto, Carl, Kira, and Baba Yaga went back to sleep. Zabuza, Haku, and Naruto were making their way to the rebel camp to join the battle. They told him before they left that his team in Wave was safe because Dracula, Frank, and some of their henchmen were going to eliminate the majority of Gato's thug force. They also said that he should try to use a different part of the contract if he needed assistance in the war's next battles. So, Brad, I can't place what your contract is supposed to be. Mind explaining so I have a selling point on why Elif Shinobi is with us? Zabuza inquired, making wide circles around the camp that were just out of sight of the sensors to make sure they didn't enter with a flimsy justification. It's known as the Monster Summon Clan, and they are the oldest summons around, even predating the tailed beasts. They had lots of numbers, but when the boss summon went dormant after a fight with the 10 tails, most split off of the contract, waiting till the time he awakens. As for why I'm joining, it won't be as a member of the Leaf. Naruto said as he took out a headband to replace the Leafs. This golden-plated headband featured the shadowed outlines of the clan's council surrounding the kanji for monster in the shape of a serpent. They went to the front gate after putting his home village headband in his utility pouch and tying the black cloth one where his Konoha one was. 3 individuals stopped them before they had reached halfway to the gate. She had just as much as the old man Hokage back home, and the brunette had a figure that most women would kill for. However, if Naruto was interpreting her chakra, it was like a controlled volcano with a steaming lake. Ao was a tall, elderly man with a Byakugan eye hidden behind an eye patch. And Cha Ya-Ra, a young man of Naruto's age, with a bandaged sword on his back. With a sickly sweet smile, the brunette said, Zabuza, what are you doing back? You're supposed to be doing jobs to gain money to help support us. She was too composed for Zabuza's taste. The two older of the 3, who knew Zabuza was no pushover, were intrigued by his statement. Now, May, I was doing a mission and almost got killed by the brat here. He offered his help for the war effort and has offered to lend us help. And why would we need the help of this shinobi? How can one shinobi change the tide of this war? May angrily replied that he didn't want to kill an unknown child. For the first time since his arrival, Naruto boasted, because I have summons and abilities that can go toe-to-toe with a Biju, meaning I can hold off and even beat their biggest trump card. That would be rather handy, but what do you have to gain out of this deal? What makes this work out for you? May asked, attempting to come up with a payment method that the child might be interested in. Zabuza and Haku, who were aware of his true origins, looked on in shock as Naruto said, the Biju sealed in me wishes for his brother to join him. Payment for this will be in the form of the 3 tails. Do this and I could barter a treaty with the old man when I get back to start up trade with you guys right away. He told the 3 people who were unaware of his origins, I am from Konoha, and though I would like to proudly wear my Konoha headband, I know that political ramifications from just one being sighted here could lead to a bigger war, so best I look like an independent traveling ninja you recruited to help. Zabuza's decision to bring this child to help became clear to them. 3 days had passed since Naruto joined the rebels, and it was already obvious that they would eventually, if slowly, defeat Yagura's forces. His presence would only hasten the rebels' potential for retaliation. He was able to send some of the minor ones he knew he wouldn't need for the fight ahead to finish what accounted for suicide missions because he had 4/6 of his summons battle ready. Although he detested it, he was reassured by the people he sent that they wouldn't die but would be unsummoned. Zabuza laughed at his own joke while continuing to attack Naruto. Well, I got to say, brat, you are a very interesting ninja. With those summonses of yours you could probably take on a group of super criminals. Right now, they were practicing on a field close to the wall. While I am glad for this training I have received over the last few days, wouldn't it be wise to rest up for tomorrow? It was true that Yagura would be defeated tomorrow. However, May advised them to wait until his clan was at full strength, giving them every advantage. They had learned that they were launching a preemptive attack against Gato through Zombie Messenger. In an act of good faith, he killed the little bastard and claimed most of his belongings for Wave Country, a small amount for Fire Country, and even some for Water Country. By tomorrow, they would be prepared. Zabuza said, "Yeah, I guess we should be rested for tomorrow, we'll need it," as they returned to camp. May was in the general's tent with Naruto, Dracula, Al, and Zabuza as the sun rose and illuminated the rebel camp. As they examined a map to discuss the battle's course, May questioned, "So how are you going to take on Yagura if you also plan on summoning a lot of your summons?" Baba Yaga gave each of the council members a one-time seal to bring with us all of the clan except the 7 summons he has handpicked for the battle and subsequent sealing. Said Dracula, "I've asked that Joe, Basil, and Apep for when he goes Biju mode. I've asked if Nayan will help me when it comes to his human form. Of course, Baba Yaga, Kira, and Carl will be on standby near the battle for when it's time for the transfer." Naruto said as he went over his 4 battle choices. The pre-battle speech, which will be the final one before the civil war is over, was due as they discussed positioning. "Today we take back what Yagura took from us. Today we get our homes and lives back. Today is the day that with our new ally we take back our country and make our way back to a road of peace." May gave an emotional speech. When the Summon Council appeared to support her while she spoke about their allies, the audience gasped. They had never seen them before, and most of them assumed it was a village or a regular ninja assisting them rather than these monsters. However, their astonishment subsided as May completed, and they turned their attention away from the clan to concentrate on the current task. All of the physically fit ninja cheerfully obeyed May's orders and joined under one of the summons. The council surrounded the village of Kiri as planned, and although the army was dispersed to strategic locations, they would unleash the full force of the summoning clan as soon as they received the signal. After Naruto removed Yagura from the village, May would shoot up a glob of lava as the agreed-upon signal. May and Naruto calmly approached the Sensor Ninja and made the decision to hold off until Yagura showed up. They didn't need to wait long because an Anbu and Yagura appeared across from the two of them. Yagura spat out the word, "You," with venom and asked, "What are you doing here?" "Come to give up and surrender." He made the foolish decision to disregard Naruto. Naruto was able to pull the Three Tails Jincha Riki away as a result. In order to gradually drain the Three Tails chakra and return the favor, Naruto slapped a seal while charging forward and going through hand seals. Baba Yaga created the seal because she claimed that if even a small portion of the beast's chakra was depleted, it would be much simpler to transfer the beast's consciousness to Naruto. Naruto fled and made a come here gesture with his hands as Yagura kicked him away after slapping him. Taking the bait hook, line, and sinker, Yagura told his Anbu, "Take care of this bloodline scum, I got a brat to teach a lesson too." The Anbu was preoccupied with Yagura leaving after a mere child when he turned to see that his opponent had disappeared. The katana he carried on his back was not in its sheath, so there was no use in trying to seize it. He tried to sense his opponent by looking around and becoming more tense. May fell from the tree above him and skewered the body to the ground because it was too late by the time he discovered her. Sensing that the Mizukage was far enough away and that more ninja were approaching, she sent out the signal. As they led the rebel forces to Kiri, the entire Summons Council removed the sealing tag and infused it with pure nature chakra upon spotting the lava glob in the air. As a result, Kiri was completely surrounded by a ring of white summon smoke. The majority of the opposing side appeared on Kiri's walls as the smoke began to fade. After the smoke cleared, the entire monster clan emerged in all its raging glory, and they all besieged Kiri with a battle cry while attempting to cause the least amount of collateral damage possible. The bloodline haters were tracked down and killed by the summons, making the opening battle a slaughter. In an instant, everything was over as everyone accepted what they had just witnessed and realized that the fight for Kiri was only half over. The majority of the summons, excluding Dracula, went back up to conduct a headcount and recuperate from the first significant action they had received in a long time, with those who were merely obeying orders being rounded up and placed under arrest for the time being. May asked, "What's wrong, Dracula?" after noticing that the summon was not returning home and seemed to be lost in thought. Dracula said uneasily, "I'm just thinking that this seemed a little too easy. Yugura was the main reason we couldn't win. He kept everyone around him weak and let himself be the first and last line of defense for this whole civil war." May said. Drac said, not feeling jealous of the brunettes' efforts to get the village back up and running. "If that's the case, it looks like you have a long road ahead of you to ensure that your village gets back up to snuff to actually compete with other villages." He and Yugura were having a stare down with our favorite blonde. Yugura questioned, "Why is it that my Biju was screaming at me to take you down where you stand?" The turtle rarely spoke and typically didn't fight when he took chakra, but upon seeing the blonde man, he became enraged and wanted to kill or at least cripple the young man in front of him. Kurama realized how difficult it would be to extract the turtle from this genjutsu and remarked, "For the love of Kami, this genjutsu must be so layered that it makes the one I was under on the night of your birth look like child's play." The Sanbi's voice from Yugura revealed that he had temporarily taken control of the fourth Mizukage. "Kurama, by order of the Akatsuki you shall turn yourself in so we may sacrifice ourselves so father's dream may come true." Naruto had to close his eyes as he gave up control to his giant fox companion when Kurama said, "Naruto, let me take over for a second. I need to send a message to that turtle." At what his brother was saying, Kurama became enraged and said, "Isobu, explain what you mean right now before what I did to Shukaku look merciful. The Akatsuki are going to revive Mom to end all war. The third Mizukage put this genjutsu on me quickly while I am temporarily myself, remember this. They are dangerous, all the grunt of the organization are over S rank easily. You need to prepare your host for them before I reform." Isobu stated before Yugura assumed authority and was once again used. "He will be punished for assuming power later, and you will die now. I will put an end to this purge once and for all," Yugura exclaimed as he leapt in Naruto's direction. When Naruto saw the impending attack, he transformed into the monster's advanced fist. When Yugura got close to the blonde, he kicked him in the midsection. Naruto spun around and then struck the cage's chest with both fists, knocking him back a few feet. He bit his thumb and proceeded through the 5 seals, using the opening to call forth the first of his battle companions. Summoning jutsu, he uttered, and a lion emerged from the smoke, charging at the recuperating cage. This was Neon, who is more famous from his myth as the Nemean lion. Even though he appears to be a typical lion, he has increased durability, and he can use chakra to further increase it. With Naruto entering from the opposite side, Neon leapt to the now recovered cage. Yugura said, "So, you hold the lion contract, no wonder those bloodline scum sought you out." After removing the hooked staff from his back, he caught the lunging lion and then used a jutsu called Water Style, Water Geyser, to launch the soaked lion in the direction of the charging blonde. After capturing the lion, Naruto noticed that Neon's one weak point had been harmed by the attack. Because of the jutsu he had just used, his insides were filled with water chakra. Naruto chose to provoke the fourth Mizukage into utilizing his tailed beast mode after dismissing the oppressed lion and sending it back to the summoning realm. Naruto smirked as he asked, "Are you scared of using your little friend? Or do you think you'll need it to even stand a chance against Mei?" He got the desired response because all Yugura saw after that remark was red, and he immediately entered Three Tails mode without realizing the seal was beginning to drain more of his tenant's chakra. Mei, Dracula, Zabuza, and Ao were on their way to meet up with the 3 sealers to get an update on the situation when Ao made a statement that caused the other 3 to accelerate as well. Ao set a new pace that was significantly faster than the previous one and declared, "The turtle has come out of its shell." When they arrived at the meeting location, they saw a tiny house on 2 very chicken-like legs that was barely the size of a dollhouse. When the proximity seal went off, a small Baba Yaga emerged to see the summon looking familiar and the 3 ninjas looking inquisitive. As the house and she grew big enough to fit the ninja, she said, "Well, don't just stand there, come in." The walls were lined with numerous porcelain eggs and Russian nesting dolls in a variety of sizes, shapes, and patterns. However, the intricate ceiling array in the center of the floor caught the ninja's attention. Baba Yaga made a teapot and cups appear from a seal on her wrist and said, "With the help of the seal Naruto placed on Yugura earlier combined with the amount of chakra given through said seal, I say it's safe to say the 3 Tails is safely sealed once he gets back here." While they waited, she said, anyone?" With the dried blood still on his hand, he leapt into the air and performed the hand signals once more while yelling his jutsu. Summoning technique. Try Serpent Binding Jutsu. 3 snake-like creatures appeared from the smoke. The first was a cobra that easily matched Manda's size. It was completely black, with the exception of its crimson underbelly, and it had glowing red eyes as it wrapped itself around the Sanbi's head. Its name was Apep, and the ancient Egyptians believed it to be a god of chaos and destruction. The second was a snake that resembled a python and rivaled Manda in size. It was mint green with a stark white underbelly, and it wrapped around the Sanbi's tails. It was called Basil, and he took great pride in being the only basilisk still alive following Cholola's powerful war cry during her fight with the 10 tails. The final serpent, Jo, also known as Ya paragraph mark Rmungandr to the ancient Norse, was larger than the other 2 combined. He was a sea serpent with a dull gray color throughout that encircled the Sanbi's legs. Although he could travel the world in his full size, he typically remained in a smaller but heavier size, which was the trade-off for the majority of the clan when they shrank to a smaller size. Now that Isobu was completely unleashed and the serpents were holding him in check, the seal was absorbing him more quickly. A few more blows would be enough to finish him. That would have been the case if Amaterasu's black flames hadn't erupted to cover the shell and drive the 3 snakes away. Kurama asked Naruto, perplexed by what was going on, what the hell is a Uchiha ability doing covering Isobu? As he and the others emerged beside Naruto after shedding their skin, Jo remarked, it seems as though a seal was placed to stop him being absorbed and only triggered after you had successfully drained a tail's worth of chakra. Naruto questioned, does that mean the seal I put on him is destroyed? Number as far as I could tell it was meant to purge anything written on the Biju not the host so your seal should still be working though there might not be much we can do as there might be another failsafe as he reaches 1 tail. Basil said. Basil immediately took off in the direction he could sense the 4 summons and 3 humans. Okay, I'm going to try something to hopefully extinguish those flames, but it will leave me drained. I need one of you to go get Baba Yaga and the others to get ready to seal the other 2 if you could stay to help defend me while they are en route. Apep inquired, what's your plan Naruto? Well, those are the sun goddess's flames, so I might be able to put it out with a jutsu Ness taught me. All right, Kurama, I'm going to need to ask for some chakra to help here. Make it count brat, Kurama replied, listening to his host's thoughts. He used his jutsu after going through a chain of 55 hand seals. Water style. Water dragon of the water god. Naruto yelled as a water dragon the size of a pep emerged from his mouth, its eyes resembling the ocean's brightest white pearls and appearing to be composed of crystal blue water. Since Amaterasu's effects were still burning him, Isobu was unable to dodge. Even with a tail's worth of chakra from Kurama, he was panting and on his knees, so the jutsu was more expensive than he had anticipated. Despite how exhausting it was, the Amaterasu surrounding the tree tails were eliminated. As the 3 humans and the 5 summons entered the well-destroyed clearing, they saw this. The image of a massive white-eyed water dragon slamming into the 3 tails and extinguishing the surrounding black flames. Then they witnessed Apep and Jo lunge, with Apep aiming for the tails and Jo for the head. It was restrained once more, and Basil retreated into the fray, holding back the front legs that attempted to scratch Jo. Sensing the turtle's declining strength as its awareness vanished into dreams. In order to catch the rapidly falling host, Yagura guided the now cleared house to the bottom. When Naruto saw the house, he tried to jump for it but collapsed because he was too tired from his previous jutsu. Carl pulled the monster summoner into the house, where the 2 unconscious Biju hosts and the 3 seal masters now lay, but he caught him with an elongated tentacle just before he hit the ground. 4 more hours passed before the doors opened once more, revealing an unconscious Yagura and a tired-looking Naruto. Well, sealing successful and as a bonus he's still alive to stand trial for his crimes. Tough I would be a slight lenient as apparently the genjutsu the 3rd Mizukage placed on him was layered so much on both him and Isobu to change both of their personalities to do this. Naruto replied, Kit, there is something Isobu wants you to tell them before you leave but needs you in here to set up the initial mental link, Kurama told him. Naruto's eyes glazing over, he said to the other 3, excuse me, but there is some information you might want, I'll be right back with that. He saw Kurama relaxing in a tree clearing and enjoying the artificial sunlight created in his mindscape. He gestures toward the empty lake, which stood in for his chakra, with a languid claw. The sight of Isobu standing on the edge of the basin, waiting for it to fill, caught his attention even though he thought the waterfall that led into it was beginning to fill it up. So what's up Isobu? Naruto asked, approaching the now free turtle and grabbing its attention. I wanted to say a couple of things. First, I thank you for freeing me and even Yagura, though it still surprises me that he's still alive after the extraction, as usually a host dies. Second, I want you to tell the human to take Yagura's old position that the Six-Tails Jincha Riki has retreated to an area around Mount Katsuragi. Third, I want to ask if I can stay with you. The man who put me in the genjutsu left his mind open while lacing me under several times. Isobu said, drawing Kurama's attention. What I gleaned, though a small piece of his plan, was truly diabolical. Though he's not Madara Uchiha, he has been bequeathed this plan by Madara and took his name to gain himself traction in putting this plan in motion. He intends to take all the tailed beasts and seal them away in the Ghetto Mazo to recreate the 10 tails. That's all I know of his plan. Isobu finished. We have to alert the Jincha Riki so they can at least prepare for the Akatsuki to go after them. If what you said was true and they are all S rank, we need to train harder and faster. Naruto said, knowing the upcoming fights with the Akatsuki. It seems if you wish to have the 6 tails back in your village, he roams around Mount Katsuragi in the Land of Fire. If you wish, I can take one of you to help collect him, as there is some information I need to share with him. Naruto said as he emerged from his stupor. Ow, I want you and Zabuza to stay here and help with the initial repairs. I am going to go with young Naruto here to the Hidden Leaf to negotiate with the Hokage about trade and to make a side stop to hopefully convince him to rejoin now that the war is over. I want this place repaired and ready for my coronation by the time I get back. I shouldn't be long, as I suspect we have a faster way of traveling than most to the Leaf. Mei said while staring at Naruto. As Baba Yaga left the walking house, he remarked, but of course, Dormammu hasn't had a chance to stretch his legs in a while. To get to Konoha, which takes most Yonin ninja a week and a half of fast-paced travel, it took 3 days of house travel at top speed. And it vanished half a mile away, content that it could finally stretch its legs after a number of arduous years. The tree hop back was quick, but when they arrived at the gate, Mei and Naruto were taken aback by what they saw. The third Hokage was in battle uniform, standing in front of the 75-foot wall, with 2 Anbu platoons behind him and his son in a battle-ready position to the left. While Naruto was taken aback by the force his gramps brought to confront them, Mei was completely stunned by the wall and the force. Hey old man, what's with all the people? It's just me and Mei here, replied Naruto. As he kept a close watch on the now identified Mei, Hiruzen remarked, Naruto, we couldn't identify you when you breached the sensor barrier, and we don't know who your friend is, so best to be prepared. When we are done here, I'll teach you the jutsu to have the barrier recognize you. Thanks for lending those summons for Wave, they helped a lot against Gato, though it would have been nice if you brought the whole team with you instead of leaving us with Kakashi and his team. Asuma told Naruto. Well, I would have, but with how Kakashi treats his team, I figured the Uchiha would demand my summons, give him the contract, and then leave the team to die at Gato's hands so as to not put up with the Uchiha. Naruto replied, well, you hit the nail on the head there, as the Uchiha did demand the contract, and to humor the lad, Dracula did his test on the brat and he failed it. Then he demanded Frank's test and got hit with a tree. Frank uprooted in response and got knocked out for the rest of the day. Suffice to say that cowed him for the rest of the trip. You're also behind you teammates in chakra control, as they are already doing point balancing and starting on combining it with tree walking. Asuma replied. Mei, sensing that Naruto would want to go greet his team and try to practice point balancing, said, if you don't mind Hiruzen, would you mind if we go talk in your office as cage to cage? After 2 more hours of discussion, trade between the 2 countries had been established and negotiated. Even though it was late, they also discussed organizing a new mission to have Team 10 accompany the new cage to Utakata tomorrow. Although she didn't need it, a one-on-one conversation with a Jincha Riki would persuade him to return to the mist. The following day, Team 10 was shown receiving their mission details while standing in front of the Hokage and Mizukage. Your mission is twofold. The first part will be to help Miss Mei here track down the target of Utakata, also known as the 6 Tails Jincha Riki. The second part is to help convince Utakata to rejoin the mist now that the civil war is over. Hiruzen was speaking to the 4 ninjas, his face. As their team looked for the 6 Tails Jincha Riki, Naruto asked his tenant, hey Kurama, what's the 6 Tails like? Well, Saiken was always a lazy one, preferring to play with bubbles than ever get involved with humans. The fact that he has a host is rather surprising. Kurama replied, that may have been my fault. Isobu said. As Shino's bugs gathered traces of chakra from their target, Naruto wondered, how so? The mindscape fell silent as Naruto concentrated on his surroundings. You see, when I was first approached to get sealed, Saiken was in a cave nearby, and during my fight with the sealing team the cave walls got destroyed and they caught sight of Saiken, and well, it appears they got him. They came to a slender figure, like a certain Nara, sprawled out on the grass in a blue kimono. Utakata looked at the individuals who approached him while he was sleeping and drew lead, and why might a team of Konoha shinobi and a civilian be doing out here? Utakata, as the new and current Mizukage, I'm bringing you back to Kiri with me. The civil war is over, and a new threat has cropped up that will require you to be guarded. Mei replied. Utakata answered, and if I refuse? As she began to prepare her chakra, Mei replied, well then you get dragged there forcefully by myself and the team I have hired. As Shino began to have his bugs slowly seep out and stealthily make their way to the target, Asuma prepared his knives after hearing the direction of the conversation. With his hands raised, Naruto used this opportunity to slowly make his way to Utakata. Naruto held out a fist and said, how about we talk about this in a separate space, Utakata, Seiken. Utakata chose to play ball and bump fists with Naruto because he still needed time to prepare his escape jutsu. When Utakata opened them again after his world went dark, he saw 5 significant changes to his surroundings. First, the forest had changed. Second, the team without Naruto had disappeared. And third, he and the other human were surrounded by the 3, 6, and 9 tails. So, what's this about Kurama, Isobu? Seiken asked, observing its host as it was pulled into the mindscape of the chakra-rich individual. Well, you see, Isobu was put under a genjutsu by Uchiha and made to obey his host's every command. Then his host was put in a genjutsu to want to kill all the users of bloodlines. Kurama said. Then this youngling came around and managed to break the genjutsu, allowing me to think for myself and remember the truth. The third Mizukage was actually the man who set all this up, the one who ordered you to be sealed into Utakata here. Isobu went on. They are planning on capturing us all to reform the 10 tails. We are going to train this one along with his summoning contract to help fight this organization. I only know of 2 members, the Uchiha who put me under the genjutsu and Kisame Hoshigaki, as he came around to taunt my previous host a time or 2. Isobu went on. We were hoping that you would be willing to cooperate with your host as the 2 of us are with Naruto. Kurama said. Reluctantly, Seiken grumbled, I guess I can cooperate with my host. It just sucks being cut off from the senses. Naruto said, if that's the issue I can fix that. You can. Seiken questioned incredulously. Yeah, my summoning contract has several seal masters I've been learning from. I should be able to make it to where it would be harder for them to extract you from Utakata and allow you sensory link and mental link with Utakata. The best part is it works both ways, meaning both parties have to not mind sharing the sensory links or thoughts. This still allows both of you privacy. Naruto replied. In an attempt to gauge the true degree of danger, Utakata raised his voice for the first time and asked, what's with all this preparation and what even is the 10 tails? The 10 tails is stronger than all 9 of us combined. For you see, the 10 tails is all of the 9-tailed beasts combined. Kurama continued, the 10-tailed rabbit is strong enough to wipe out humanity several times over. We really should train to help prevent or at the least delay the upbringing of the 10 tails. Seiken concluded for his guest. Isobu said, don't forget to have him sign your summoning contract. Naruto and Utakata simultaneously asked, what's this now? Yeah, each of the tailed beasts has a contract associated with them. I have a turtle contract, Kurama has a fox contract, and Seiken has a slug contract. Isobu clarified. Both humans said, now why didn't you tell me you had a contract, as Utakata attacked Seiken and Naruto surrounded Kurama. Seiken retorted, you hated me with a passion for what happened with your master. Kurama shrugged and said, I forgot all about my contract. While I would recommend you sign mine, Naruto, there seems to be some extra steps for you. It appears that a person by the name of Might Guy is the current holder of the contract. Between getting his permission and needing both contract bosses' permission in order to sign both. It might be a moment till you can sign mine, Isobu replied. Alright kid, looks like you'll need to talk to Tsunade Senju in order to sign mine. Seiken stated to Utakata. Kurama stated, unable to remember the existence of a fox summoner, all you'll need for mine is to talk to the boss of the clan. So, side conversation done, you'll go back to Kiri without a fight? Naruto inquired. Yeah, guess I got to train, man, this is going to cut into my bubble blowing time. Utakata was upset. He began to say, now how do we get out of here? But Seiken and he vanished from view. Naruto is speaking to his team when Utakata opens his eyes. Mei's approach made Utakata tense. Observing the tension in his shoulders, Mei said, relax, he already gave the okay that you are willingly joining. The blonde, hyperactive knucklehead asked, so, What now? Mei directed the final section towards Asuma and said, now your job is done, and we go our separate ways. Tell the Hokage we should have a team of genin ready for the Chunin exams. And we shall see you then. As he turned to wave goodbye to his team and headed to Konoha, Asuma remarked, well, then I'd hope they are ready to face this team. Because for the next month and a half we are training for the Chunin exams. Mission successful pops. Mei also says she will be sending a team to participate in the Chunin exams. Asuma responded, excellent, well done, we should have a promising Chunin exam this year. Before you take them to train I would like a word with Naruto and his summons. Hiruzen replied. Asuma disappeared in a whirl of leaves, saying, okay, set up your gear and prepare for training. We'll meet at our training grounds in half an hour. As his two teammates left to set up their supplies, Dracula stood in front of the Hokage with a puff of smoke. Dracula said, so, what's this about Hiruzen? Naruto was also intrigued. In response the wrinkled Hokage pulled out a scroll that was titled Bandits. In this scroll we have all the missions ranking from C to A related to bandits. We excluded the S ranks as we feel we would need Naruto nearby in case he needs to summon more reinforcements. As you may know Naruto, the Chunin exams are in a month and a half time. The hope is for your clan Dracula to clean up the bandit camps. With a beaming smile, Dracula took the scroll and said, I'll take this back to the council to assign teams to capture and reverse summon them for sustenance for the monsters of the contract that thrive with humans as a food source. This works out better for everyone as you get the food source, and we have increased trade and travel on civilians without putting our ninjas' lives due to little information. Hiruzen replied, what are S-rank camps? Naruto inquired. S-rank bandit camps are rare. According to our knowledge there are 11 in the world. 2 in each of the big 5 and 1 in the Rain village. There are 2 ways a bandit camp or organization counts for S-rank. One is to have many S-rank nuke nin in the camp like the one in Rain. Or for the ones in the big 5 have 10 or so A-rank nuke nin leading a camp of several hundreds of grunts with barley any chakra. They are classified as such as it would usually take several teams of Anbu to clear out to reduce the risk of casualties on our side. So, most of the time we wait till some break off to start their own camp in order to gain information or just ensure they don't go back to the camp. Hiruzen went on to explain that, those camps might take most of the council. Though I am more impressed they can operate at that size or keep the men they do have, since moving so many would surely take a lot of effort to keep hidden, said Dracula. That's the thing though, is that they don't require stealth. They usually split up under each commander of the camp and do multiple raids at a time, and when they are back in their camp they have the numbers and home field advantage. Hiruzen said. What about the ones in Sand and Mist? They are our allies. Could we possibly strengthen ties by taking out their own S-ranked camps? I am not saying do a purge of their bandits like we are, but more take out some of the bigger threats and make trade and commerce between us easier. Naruto offered an idea. Hiruzen and Dracula both considered it. I'll have to bring this up with Mei and Rasa next time I meet them, which will most likely be the Chunin exams. Hiruzen said. Dracula then poofed away to gather teams and prepare them for the missions. Well, I'll be off. Naruto, while the council and the teams assigned are on these missions, we will be sure to leave Kira and Baba out of them to continue your SEAL training. Speaking of, Mei told me about a water dragon you used that left you drained, so I'll be having Asuma teach you nature conversion for the month and a half leading up to the Chunin exams. That way it's easier to launch jutsu off without them being so taxing. Who knows, if you train in one release instead of all of yours, you might be able to use some of the lower ranked jutsu without or few hand signs. Hiruzen began and ended with a joke. Naruto questioned, that's possible. What's possible? Hiruzen asked, perplexed. Doing a jutsu without hand signs. Replied Naruto, well yes, I can do several without hand signs. In fact, there are few jutsu that I have in my arsenal that actually require hand signs. I mostly use them to confuse my opponents. By using hand signs, if they haven't faced me before, forces them to underestimate me as they think the rumors about me aren't true. Hiruzen replied after having comprehended his query. With that, Naruto's body flickered out of their presence with a puff of smoke. Well, this gives me an idea. See you later, old man. As his team entered the training grounds, Asuma announced, okay team, we'll be training in a slightly different fashion in the upcoming month and a half. The team sat down on the grass at this point, anticipating a longer discussion. Since I plan on enrolling you in the Chunin exams, I'll be ensuring you have what it takes to all become Chunin, so let me break down what each of your training schedules will be. The freckled boy raised an eyebrow in curiosity at being first, but he showed no other reactions. We'll start with Shino. While you have great chakra reserves, great control over your chakra, and outstanding control over your insects, you lack the ability to improvise with your bugs and any jutsu to make your chakra reserves be useful, so over the next month and a half I will be teaching you improvisation and jutsu. Next is Shikamaru. Now you have excellent control of both your chakra and shadow. You could have a bigger reserve, and even if you don't have an affinity to it, I would like to teach you a fire jutsu or two for you to use. Asuma went on. Why make me learn a fire jutsu if I don't have an affinity for it? The point. The pineapple-haired genin nodded in understanding as Asuma replied, simple, on a long-term mission you may run out of flash tags to help with creating shadows. So instead, I could teach you some fire jutsu to make a less powerful but more deadly light to extend your shadow. Now Naruto, I'm assuming with two beasts inside you your control is back to being shot for the most part. So, in order to fix that we'll be utilizing clone training for the days we train together. How that will look will be that you will train for an hour. We'll start with 1000 clones doing a variety of chakra exercises, then you will meditate as they dispel in groups of 50. An hour after the last clones dispel you will create 1000 more to start on nature transformation. Shino inquired inquisitively, Sensei, what is nature transformation? Well, it makes jutsu of different elements easier to use and less taxing. For example, if one to reach a mastery of fire manipulation, they could use some of the more complex jutsu with little more difficulty or cost than an average shinobi would. A fireball, replied Asuma. Shikamaru questioned, well, how do we find out our affinities? Usually, you'd channel some chakra into some special paper, but I don't have any on me right now. Tell you what though, I'll grab some before our next session, promised Asuma. On Konoha, the sun had not yet risen when Team 10 began preparing for the Chunin exams. However, we see three figures standing beside a river, just outside the forest, before those upstarts could begin training. How are the teams split? Hiruzen inquired. Well, we have them split into two. After looking at the map, there are several camps up this stream, so we should be able to hit all but the S-ranked camps in the span of 24 hours, but in order to do that we needed the extra pair of hands and flippers. Dracula began pulling out the map that had been given to him the other day, which had new markings indicating all the teams that would be competing in what would be known as the Bandit Armageddon, where only the strongest bandits would survive today. As you can see, we have preset teams that will go to certain camps that are C and B rank, then the A ranks will be hit by members of the council or certain individuals teamed up as per their request or as dictated to the council. Though there are a few camps that will only need one monster to actually capture all of the occupants, Dracula concluded by pointing to a few specific camps. The third began, well, Naruto, if you wou. Drac announced the ground rules. Well, will you be willing to do this? Hold on, there are some stipulations that the council has put considering the strain this would put on young Naruto. The capped man interrupted. 1. If you are to do one summon, you will require the help of your two tenants. 2. You need to wear the forest crown as you summon the others. 3. You will take the day off from training as you will be sending a clone with each of the groups to learn and understand the battle effects and to also function as a backup for some of the teams if needed. You got both of us supporting you, though I am curious about what the crown is supposed to accomplish. Replied Kurama. All four received a response after repeating the question in support. Well, originally this crown would store nature energy that would be required to enter human sage mode. But with a few seals thanks to Baba Yaga, it can now regulate sage energy. We are only using it for this once as it is imperative you learn to do this on your own in case the crown fails. This time you have me to help in the off chance it messes up. The Fanged One explained. Naruto began to move toward the riverbank to perform the summons, saying, well, I guess it's time. Since all of the sage markings were only at open semicircles rather than full circles, it wasn't a complete transformation, but with the crown on his head, he could feel more powerful as the nature chakra flowed into his chakra pool. The words, summoning jutsu, shadow clone jutsu, caused Naruto to stagger forward and drop to one knee. His head's crown fell off. He took 3 taels worth of chakra from Kurama and a tael and a half from Isobu, almost exhausting his normally abundant reserves. However, the outcome was well worth it. Every team had a clone in the clearing surrounding the river. In all, there were 500 teams, all of them wearing a sly smile. Take him back please. Koninger and I shall return when everyone is done to see how he is recovering, Dracula said, glancing at Naruto with concern as he realized how exhausted he was. Naruto is found meditating on the Hokage's office couch as the sun rises. He had not yet reached even 1/8 of his reserves. Even though some of the clones wouldn't reach some of the farther flung camps until afternoon, none of them had exploded since the signal to begin the attacks was sunrise. The first clone then burst into existence. You've been warned about my initial attempt to be a little graphic. The 9 hellhounds were the first to reach their camp. They were hidden until they had their fangs around the victim's neck because they were given a B-ranked camp. From the clones' point of view from a nearby tree, the camp was in a complete mess. The half-mile-long clearing was littered with entrails and severed limbs, and the grass was covered in blood. Any survivors were gently dragged by the 9 hounds to the bonfire in the center of the camp. They then proceeded to cauterize the open wounds on the few missing limbs using sticks they had taken from the fire. After gathering all the bodies and survivors, they summoned everyone back home. In quick succession, the next 3 involved Medusa's siblings Steno and Urieli using a visual genjutsu that is solely within their sister's absolute control to paralyze every member of their A-ranked camp. Basil and Apep worked together to form the second camp, which surrounded the A-ranked camp and gradually narrowed it while taking pleasure in the lowly bandits' petty attempts to pierce their scales. They even shrugged off fireballs that the ninja in the camp threw. Since it was Chigo versus an A-ranked camp, the third camp in the small batch was terrifying. To prevent any attempts at escape, the camp was encircled by webbing. After setting up the web, Chigo began to enter the camp. Using his shapeshifting skills to create more legs and lengthen them, he moved through the camp, precisely spearing any bandits he came across. He makes sure to morph a spinneret on the end of the leg to web up the wounds and prevent them from dying as he pulls his leg back from spearing their stomach and pulls the legs out, leaving pieces of their guts behind. He could still feel the main camp leader in his tent, totally unaware, prior to reverse summoning. Chigo turns into a stunning and sophisticated woman after he decides to play a practical joke on him. He calls out to him in a man's voice, stating that they have apprehended a woman who was traveling by the side of the road. A B-rank missing Nin was the camp's boss. Upon exiting the tent, he initially noticed the woman before turning to observe the condition of his camp. When he returned his focus to the articulate woman, he saw that her mouth was unhinged. With his fangs still dripping blood and the head of the missing Nin hanging by a thin strand of skin from the giant spider's mouth, Chigo completed gathering all of the cannon fodder. Then they all summoned their prey in reverse. When 44900 clones suddenly appeared, Naruto winced. These were the groups that included werewolves, gargoyles, vampires, and zombies. The B and C ranked camps were easily cleared by them all. They were picked because these teams' skill sets complemented each other well and there were numerous cannon fodder camps. Naruto opened his eyes and saw that he and the third weren't the only people in the room. Glancing up, I saw Enma standing behind Hiruzen and Jiraiya of the Sannin, conversing with a small toad perched on his shoulder. As the old toad put it, "So, the tadpole is clearing out the interior of the border." That is correct, Fukasaku, all but the S-ranked camps for now, though those will happen before the Chunin exams as a way to project that we have everything under control. The sage replied. The toad sage questioned, "What is happening to the wealth that the camps have amassed?" Naruto said, "Thank you for reminding me. Summoning jutsu. Is it time for the cleanup mission already?" A 2-legged, bone-thin, blue-skinned creature hunched over, glancing around the office at the other 2 humans and 2 summons staring at him. This was Kapala, also referred to as the Chupacabra in his mythology. There are a number of swift creatures in the entire clan, but he could confidently claim to be the fastest. Naruto tossed a standard-sized scroll to the starving creature and said, "Yes, the closest camp has 5 goats left for you to gain that extra speed boost. Don't forget your scroll." As soon as he had the scroll firmly in his grasp, he vanished in an instant. That was Kapala. He's the fastest land-based creature in the clan that stayed by a wide margin. The plan was to send him in after the camps have been cleared of bandits for valuables, in which Konoha will take a portion based on mission ranking and the rest will be distributed around the rest of the Land of Fire. This goes twofold. 1. It will help wrench control that the council has gained and allow for changes to be made to the current graduation system and other establishments around the village. 2. It will help prevent more bandits from being created in the Land of Fire, as why steal if there is more wealth to go around in desperate times lesson. Naruto concluded. Jiraiya asked, "I noticed you said in the border, what do you mean by that, brat?" But he had a brilliant idea about how this might actually work out in a different way that the child was blind to. Well, obviously if we start having wealthier common folk, the bandits from outside the border will come flocking trying to steal it, but with the sudden lack of bandit camps it will deter any smart bandits realizing that we took all of those bandit camps out in the span of a day. Though dumber bandits might slip by border patrol on pure luck, they won't have an easy time establishing a camp given the wealth of normal civilians they would be able to hire our ninja to exterminate them. In fact, after the camps, the land of fire should become a no-man's land for bandits. Naruto said as he glanced at the clock and realized was approximately half an hour away the camps had been eliminated. I noticed you said that remained and land-based when you mentioned Kapala. What did you mean by that? Enma inquired. Naruto was only using roughly half of his reserves when he summoned Kapala, and he broke his neck. Most of the contract split off when the main boss went to sleep, saying they would only return when they have a summoner, and the boss was woken up. As for the fast bit, I was told there are two beings of about equal speed to him, but one's primary method is air and the other sea. So, it's hard to really know which one is the actual fastest. Naruto continued. Curious, Fukasaku asked, who were the other two? As he went back to the couch, Naruto remarked, their names are Batoi, fastest in the air, and Turso, fastest in the seas. I have about 15 minutes till the next clones pop. Any questions? Naruto replied. The elderly leader inquired, how are your reserves doing? Not too bad, I'm about at half, but my recovery rate should be faster as Isobu and Kurama have finished replenishing their chakra and now the seal focuses all the chakra it took to restore them to replenishing my reserves. Replied Naruto. The elderly Hokage questioned, perplexed by the young blonde's meaning. I thought there was no seal. There is no extra seal, the only seal left is the one placed on me by the Shinigami itself. And even then, Baba Yaga takes a look at it every time I sleep in the summons realm that she's starting to learn the god sealing technique. Jiraiya laughed. Seal's the one branch the gods forgot to place a limit to. He laughed. Naruto went back to the couch to continue his meditation after realizing the time and that more clones would soon begin to appear. Ness went upstream to attack the bandit camps on the river that led from the sea, and the next clone to emerge followed. By himself, he destroyed 3 camps, tagging and tying a reverse summons to the bandits before continuing on. Ness didn't reveal a startling ability until the final camp, when he was unable to reach every one of them from the water. He transformed his fins into a sauropod's legs as he swam to the river's edge, and he walked on the land to kill the remaining bandits by severing their legs in 2. Ness finished the legs of the remaining bandits before responding, yeah, I don't like to cause it uses a lot of energy and chakra, but since we'll be dining on humans, and I had this small snack, I should be fine. You should notice that some more clan members should gain new abilities now that they have the proper diet of human body parts. Naruto's clone asked, you can walk on land. As the last of the bandits were tied up and sent back, Ness and the clone vanished in a puff of smoke. The team that followed Carl and the Siren Sisters as they attacked the other 4 camps along the river's edge was the next clone to vanish. Their song would be sung by the Sirens. Carl easily captured 8 bandits at a time and sent them back to the summon realm with a paralyzing seal that prevented them from moving. The bandits were now on the water's edge. They changed their tactics at the 4th camp. Carl broke the size seal this time and grew into a 5-story tall octopus. The bandits were all too busy trying to defeat the obvious octopus summon to notice the sirens sneaking up behind them and slashing their throats with their claws, which were poisoned to the point of paralysis, preventing them from screaming as they gargled their last breaths. The remaining 7 council members divided the final 40 camps into groups of 10. The first group to finish their 10 camps was Zevon and Narmer. Together, they swiftly reached each camp by using Zevon's speed to cut the bandits' throats, and Narmer wrapped their bandages like tendrils to send the mummified bandits back to the summon realm. It was comparable to Ness, where both council members displayed a new skill during the previous camp. Zevon grew to a height of nearly 30 feet, and in less than a minute, he devoured half the camp thanks to his size and speed. In search of their attacker, the remaining bandits gathered around the center. Narmer sat down and pressed his hand into the ground, the dirt turning to sand around his hand, just as he had desired. The ground surrounding the bandits' feet gradually turned to sand, as the clone observed. The bandits were suddenly covered as before with a quick blow like a cobra, but this time the bandages didn't separate like the previous time, instead, they appeared to pulse from the top of the cocoons into the ground. This went on for a few moments until the pulsing ceased and the bandages came off, exposing husks that crunched to the ground with a snap of bone. Both vanished with a contented sigh, and the clone exploded. The next to finish his set of 10 was Frank. He was quick. The only reason he appeared at each camp was to dash past them and toss them to the center, where the force and speed of the toss broke their necks. He also demonstrated a new ability at the previous camp. Nearly all of his stitching came undone, and it exploded out quickly, piercing each bandit as it began to pass through and extract their organs now that they were dead. The stitching improved and substituted the scavenged organs for Frank's original ones. After finishing the stitching, he gave the clone a thumbs up before vanishing, with the clone following suit. Medusa and Sato were the next pair to finish. They moved quickly through their camps. Naruto was certain that they would have been the first to finish if it weren't for the distance between the camps. In order to get everyone's attention, they used a combination in the first half of the camps where Sato picked up a boulder with Medusa on top and threw it into the camp. Medusa then used her snakes to look everywhere and make eye contact with every bandit at once, frightening them all. For the next 4, they changed it so that Sato could use her new power. This time, Medusa would sneak into the camp and use one of her swords to cut someone's throat. After half the camp was destroyed by her blade, Sato, shrunk by a size change seal, called forth the skeletons that her companion had killed, observing as the meat organs and skin remained on the ground as their skeleton rose out of their corpse. As they charged and killed the remaining bandits, the gray brain matter leaked out and was absorbed into Sato's skeleton, turning her bones a purer white with each skeleton that collided with her. At the final camp, Medusa demonstrated her new power by transforming into a manta-sized snake, devouring every camper before they both vanished. This clone was pursuing Dracula and Koninger when the last one exploded. The pair is a formidable combination. Koninger gave the order for plants to move and ensnare the people in the first 3 camps. This allowed Dracula to move quickly through the crowd, weaving in and out of the bandits as they dozed off due to reduced blood circulation. Dracula sped through the next 3 camps, hypnotizing the people to comply and then reverse summoning them back. Koninger claimed that the final group of 3 was his moment to shine and that wooden spikes erupted at strategic locations in these camps with a chant that sounded mystical. However, the spikes kept growing until they were eventually replaced by massive fir trees, similar to those found in the land of snow or iron. As soon as the trees loomed over the camp, the pine needles began to fall and rain down on the camp, directly on top of it, and through the unwary camp members. Upon closer examination, the pine needles were imbued with natural energy, and long grass and flowers appeared as they pierced the ground. Naruto opened his eyes and declared, "It's done." The elderly leader questioned, "Aren't Dracula and Koninger supposed to return?" After spending roughly half the day in a meditative state, Naruto stood popping his back and stretching his joints and said, "Yeah, they told my clone following them that they will be here in 5 minutes or so. They wanted to stretch their legs." Toad Sage: "How are you feeling, Naruto?" The blonde answered gravely, "I've killed before if that's what you're implying. I don't enjoy it, but I know it's a necessary evil, especially in the ninja world." Dracula shifted out of his bat form and dropped Koninger, who had changed into a rock to evade attention and potential spies, as he entered the room and said, "Okay Naruto. We are going to finalize your training schedule for this month and a half before the Chunin exams. Then once Kapala is back I want you to go back to your mom's cottage and rest. Normally you would come to the summon realm but not tonight." Dracula said. Naruto said, "Okay. This won't be our average dining experience tonight. Most of the clan weakened by not feasting on one part or another of humans aren't going to be able to control themselves with the feast tonight." The vampire clarified, "Oh, I see." Naruto replied, breaking the tense silence. Hiruzen asked, "So, what are your training plans for him?" "Right, so, we are going to focus on trying to get you to master elemental transformation of water and wind. While also rounding out your jutsu repertoire, we are also going to try and get 1 or 2 of your jutsu mastered. And lastly you will be training with Kira and Baba Yaga on your seals," replied Dracula. Naruto questioned, "What do you mean mastered?" "The ability to do them without hand seals. Also Yaga and I will be feeling out your chakra during this to determine when you'll be ready for sage training," replied Koninger. From the Gama Sanin's shoulder, Pa said, "May I make a request that I be there for his sage training? While I don't doubt your methods, I've also had the experience of training 2 humans in sage mode." Koninger expressed gratitude for the toad's gesture, saying, "We'll send a messenger zombie when we get to that point. I can always appreciate another set of eyes when it comes to nature chakra." As Dracula finished speaking, Kapala entered the room. "We are hoping to get your shadow clones and either a wind or water jutsu mastered," Dracula said. It will depend on how fast you master your nature transformation. In an instant, he left the scroll on the desk and disappeared. The two vanished after saying, "Must still have some excess energy." "Well, there's the scroll. Naruto, reverse summon yourself 5 a.m. sharp tomorrow to start training." "Well, it looks like you have your work cut out for you. Luckily your team is excused for missions for the next month and a half. Even though your summons did most of the fighting your teammates and you did go through a civil war, I suggest you also find a hobby to immerse yourself in to cope with our line of work," the enlightened leader suggested. Naruto inquired, "Do you have any recommendations?" "Well, I do painting, Jiraiya has writing, Asuma has shogi and smoking. While I can't recommend one specific thing, I'd recommend an instrument. I remember reading about one of your old clan members who would use instruments to cast genjutsu since the large chakra reserves made it hard for all of your clansmen to cast genjutsu." The priest leader replied, "Thanks for the tip, old man. How about I give you one in return? You can use shadow clones to get your paperwork done faster and have more free time." Mom's diary mentioned that Dad did it all the time and he used seals to make a genjutsu to hide them, Naruto stated prior to body flickering home. The Hokage said, "So that's how that cheeky bastard did it." This caused 10 clones to start working in order to finish all the backlog of paperwork that the fucking civilian council likes to drown him in. Yo guys, it's RyugaXD. You already know YouTube has its limit size, so if you want to see the spicier, uncensored, and exclusive stuff I can't post here, check out my Patreon. That's where I drop all my 18+ lemon content, early uploads, and more. Links in the description. Come join the fun.